All right. Okay. Hi everyone. This is my first actual conversation with someone on my channel on Mindgasms here, and I'm talking to Dustin Cubit, who I know from Mixed Mental Arts. We've talked to each other a lot on the Mixed Mental Arts chat that you can see on YouTube all the time. The next one's on gun control next Saturday. So, Dusty, why don't you just say a little bit about yourself?
All right. Everyone calls me Dusty, and everybody in the audience. You
Yeah, I do
can,
all the time.
well, that's what I prefer. It
Okay.
keeps me more incognito. I do not want to know. Oh, I'm at work. That's all you need to know. Yeah, just a little bit about myself. I am one of the, I guess you'd say, tribe members of the Mixed Mental Arts content team. So I work behind the scenes for Mixed Mental Arts. I do produce videos. I help with video editing. I also help with organization and production, and communication, and just like a lot of general menial tasks that people have to do behind the scenes. I may be one of those people. So, have you seen some of our YouTube videos? They are very well shot by Reed Nice Wonder. I actually edit some of those YouTube videos for Mixed Mental Arts for general consumption, and that's what I do for MMA. I am pretty much like I would say, a jack of all trades but master of none. So I'm like, if somebody can't do something because they might be busy, I may be able to pick up the slack in that area. Since I'm like a super multi-skilled person, like I do some Photoshop stuff, like the graphics. I run some of the YouTube page elements. I'll go and upload videos. I also am an administrator on the Facebook group, and I also post through a lot of the social media outlets on Mixed Mental Arts. So some of those Instagram posts, Twitter posts, Facebook posts, they're actually done from a group of us behind the scenes. And we also respond to questions and comments officially through the veil of Mixed Mental Arts. But it might be just one of us from behind the scenes answering a question. Um, Whoever gets to it first usually answers it. So we all have different schedules. We're all busy in different time zones. So it does look like we are Big Brother, but we're just like a bunch of people hammering away behind the scenes there.
I was wondering about that with Mixed Mental Arts, whether it's always Hunter that I'm talking to through there or whether it's like other people too. So that's good to know.
Yeah, it's your best bet if you want to know you're talking to Hunter is to make sure you're actually talking to Hunter's account. Um, because Hunter obviously does have his own Facebook account, and he will comment using his. But usually, when we use the Mixed Mental Arts account, it's usually to promote maybe articles or events that we set up, or maybe like a Brian Callen comedy show or something like that. Um, if we're doing like really personal opinion stuff, then we'll use our accounts. But if we're just like asking a question to everybody, not getting personal or just like starting a conversation, that's when we'll use the Mixed Middle Arts account.
I should say a little bit about what Mixed Mental Arts is and who Hunter Motz is for people watching this who don't know. Uh, Mixed Mental Arts is the group that both you and I, Dusty, are a part of. That we kind of have idea sex about lots of different ideas and try to figure ourselves out and try to figure ideas out. And Hunter Motz is the co-host of the podcast with Brian Callen, who is a well-known comedian and actor, and he's been in movies like The Hangover and stuff like that. And he's awesome and hilarious, and so is Hunter. And I think they're both really smart. And I personally love being a part of their cult, and I bet I could probably say the same for you, Dusty.
Yeah, I love it. It's for me, it's a part of the process of ikigai, and I'll go ahead and explain that because it's a concept that I learned through mixed mental arts. So ikigai is finding fulfillment in life through the many facets that life make up. So your social circle, your work, your play, your free time. What that means is getting that all in balance to feel fulfilled. And you don't have to be a rich man to be fulfilled. You can be a poor man to be fulfilled. You can just as long as you have the things that make your life meaningful and they're all coalescing into one point. That is what ikigai is. So, in my sphere, I would say helping out mixed mental arts is part of that process for me. Um, it's one of the few outlets I have to just like talk about ideas because sometimes ideas can be dangerous. You talk to the wrong person about an idea that you might be, battling within about just like a coworker or maybe like a family friend or even like a family member. But say that that specific idea is, it might be offensive to their worldview, but it's not really there to push offense on anybody. It's just to discuss the idea itself. The thing I like about mixed mental arts is we can discuss ideas without any social ostracism or fear that we might be socially ostracized. So I know that there are some, work environments where you can't really, go to the cooler and just kind of freely discuss things and, without it having some type of political consequence within your work, office politics and whatnot. So, because of our stratified and very partisan society, and I'm talking mainly, Western or American society is very polarized right now. Um, just talking about the wrong political thing and making an assertion about the wrong political thing can get you in trouble. But in mixed mental arts, that's not going to happen. As long as you stay civil, you're not calling people names, being derisive, and just an ugly person. Everybody would get along fine, and we're able to discuss really heavy topics without everybody getting offended by it because we know that we're not here to offend anybody. We're just here to find some solutions to these answers. Um, and you can find a solution from any place. You can find it from the left, the right. You can take what's good from either side, mash it together, and come up with something new and practical that might work for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the one of the main things that we always talk about in mixed mental arts is taking what is useful, ignoring what is not, and making it uniquely your own, right? To try to like kind of create your own personal mythology that Hunter Motz talks about a lot. Yeah, that's one thing that I like a lot about mixed mental arts too, is that it's like a bunch of open-minded people discussing ideas, and you don't have to worry about getting socially ostracized like you were talking about. And even if it's with ideas that you find morally reprehensible or something like that. Like one thing that I really liked about some of the more recent chats was Ed or Sam's Bulldog on Twitter coming on to a few of them and like debating with Hunter and a lot of us. So that's really good for Hunter because it like he was inviting one of his harshest critics to talk to all of us. And then it's also really brave for Ed too, because he was like coming into an environment where a whole bunch of people disagree with him. And I think we've figured out well, we figured out a decent amount at least, and I think more importantly got to know each other a lot better through those what I thought were really interesting debates.
Yeah, I really like Ed. I remember the very first chat we had, he was on it, and it actually got really heated. I know you've probably seen it. Did you watch the first MMA chat?
No, I don't think I did. Which one was that?
It was the very, very first one.
No, I
What
don't
was the
think I've seen that
topic?
one yet.
Yeah, that one, Ed was on it. I'll have to look up what the topic was, but it was very similar to the last one that Ed was on. So it did get down to the topics of Islam and, his strong feelings about how women are treated in certain Islamic countries. Um, the first time that he came on, it did get really heated. And by heated, some people did get emotional. He got pretty mad at a point. It didn't go so out of control that everyone was just like hating everybody, but it did get very passionate. Um, this last one was very civil compared to it. And we think that we are kind of, pushing through to him. I don't want to make it sound like he's not a reasonable person or anything. He typically is reasonable on most aspects, but I think there's just some parts that maybe we're not communicating effectively to him exactly what we mean, that he may not be understanding, certain parts of our arguments, but um, I think he's well-meaning. He's very passionate, but I think we just probably need to communicate with him better. Um, Possibly the same from him to us. But, yeah, those are some great debates that we do have, and people don't typically spiral out of the control. It happens on occasion in the Facebook group where people just get really angry and start name calling. We typically nip that in the bud pretty quickly, but, yeah, Sam's bulldog is an interesting guy to talk to.
Yeah, I should see if he wants to talk to me on my channel here sometime too. I bet that would be a great conversation. And I've definitely done my fair share of like getting out of hand and getting triggered sometimes in the Facebook group too. But yeah, like I like to I just like to be contrarian, which I think I have in common with you and Isaiah and probably a lot of other people. So like I'll argue I'll argue against liberals if I'm talking to liberals, but I'll argue against conservatives if I'm talking to conservatives. And then so like there are some things that kind of like emotionally trigger me sometimes too. But I think like what you were saying too is important to remember also that I think most of the time it's probably safe to assume that people have good intentions. Like one, while I agree with like a lot of criticisms of Sam Harris, I think that when people say that he has bad intentions or something like that, or people have said that about on the Facebook group about Jordan Peterson a few times too, that both Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, they're like malicious or something. But I always try to like I try to remember that it's important to remember Hanlon's razor, which is something like ignorance is often mistaken for malice, and that's like you could say that about conspiracy theories and conspiracy theory thinking too, like with the quote unquote 9/11 truthers, for example, how they think that George W. Bush engineered a big conspiracy to destroy his own buildings to get America into a war. Maybe there are some grains of truth in that, but I think that assuming that someone has bad intentions is usually a bad assumption to make.
Yeah, and the whole 9/11 thing's super strange, but I think there's just way too much evidence to show that it's not a government conspiracy. It's just not. It's too big of a conspiracy for this government to pull off. Like, usually when they do happen, it's by such a small group of people. Like, if you take, like, the Gulf of Tonkin, yeah, that one was obviously a false flag, but I really don't know how many people were a part of, starting that false flag. As far as 9/11, um, it's pretty obvious that Osama bin Laden trained some Saudis to come over here and do some damage. I don't think really George Bush had anything to do with it, or our government, but the response from it was pretty insane. Of course, our country at that point in time was heavily emotionally involved in the tragedy. So at that point in time, when the war popped off, I believe it was like in the 90 percentile that his approval rating was. Of course, that helped his approval rating, but I don't think he orchestrated it so that his approval rating would go up. I don't see George Bush as an evil person. He's just trying to be a president. Like, as bad as Trump is, I think that he does wanna do good for this country. He's just not competent to do so. I know I've been reading up on him. I read Fire and Fury. Um, it seems like a lot of the people that he surrounded himself with were not politically savvy. So, his main advisors at one point in time were Reince Priebus, Steve Bannon, his daughter, and son-in-law. So out of those 3, Reince Priebus is the only one that was in the political machine, but he was 3rd on the totem pole. Um,
Who's Reince Priebus? I'm unfamiliar with him.
Reince Priebus was the chief of staff, Trump's first chief of staff entering into the White House. He was also the head of the RNC before he got tapped to be the chief of staff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I make I try to kind of make like basically centrist opinions or arguments about Trump most of the time, because like I said on one of the mixed mental arts chats recently, he's probably almost undeniably not the best president in the history of presidents, but he's probably also not literally mentally retarded and literally conspiring with his Nazi buddies to make America a Nazi state. And I think I posted on the Mixed Mental Arts Facebook group the other day one of Thaddeus Russell's podcasts where he was talking to this political commentator guy, and he called him an anti-Trumper. And I thought that was really funny because I kind of consider myself that sometimes, because I argue against anti-Trump people because, like I said on the Facebook group the other day, that a lot of the anti-Trump people, there seem to be a lot more of them than the pro-Trump people, which is why I more often make kind of seemingly pro-Trump arguments, because the anti-Trumpers act like Trump is literally Satan and he's going to literally rape your children and your entire family. But like, if I were talking to pro-Trump people, I would make anti-Trump arguments.
yeah, usually I do argue with both sides. And typically, when you're arguing with both sides, it seems that the sides that you argue with are coming at it from a limited view. So usually, if someone's like very anti-Trump and left, they don't understand why Trump won, and that there's so many different reasons why he won, but they can't understand that there's this other side of America that they've never been exposed to, and it's not a racist America. It's just an America that has different value systems. They value different things over um, what one side, like, for instance, like, how does each side deal with the poor? You know, left, they want social systems, social dependency systems in place to deal with the poor. And the way that Trump dealt with the poor, at least campaigned, was for jobs. Now, those are two valid systems. Like we have Scandinavia, who has large social benefits for those who are in the underclass. And we have communism, which tries to give everybody a job, but they everybody ends up being poor. So you just have to find the right balance between social systems and opportunity. It looks like Trump was going to the opportunity because he was hitting hard, like the areas that have been wrecked economically for the past 30 years. So we're talking about manufacturing, jobs that you can get a decent amount of pay without being a college graduate. So, you're getting 20 bucks an hour and you never went to college. That sounds great. A lot of people who've graduated from college don't make that much. So, all of these jobs that don't require, going through 4 years of schooling, of course, are being shipped overseas through globalization, but that's pretty much an inevitability. Our society is highly connected nowadays. We have the internet. We everybody has access to global news 24/7. We have access to, politics from all over the world. Before the internet, we had to rely on newspapers. So, you know, you had your dailies, which you would get locally, and, the big ones like LA Times, New York Times. But there was no market for global newspapers really on a local level. Like, I think of the average citizen in 1980, the way their news would be filtered would be through these other outlets. Instead of going directly to the outlets or, having all this alternative news media reinterpreted, being a bit more nuanced, we have, YouTube, alternative media. It's really hard to keep track of what's good and what's not, but then again, there's a lot more perspective that we can, um, consume because of the connectedness through the internet. So there's just this mindset we have to, f we kinda have to just embrace that we're so connected now, so we're gonna have to understand each other more now. And the way that technology is progressing so quickly, it's very important that we understand, everybody's cultural origins and the way they think, how they handle certain issues, and what can we learn from them. Like, we can certainly learn things from Scandinavia, we could learn things from Japan, we could learn things from Germany. It's the information's all out there now. Everybody can see it. There's no shield. There's no mainstream media filter that we have to process everything through now. So we have access to everything, which is great. That's going to progress humanity and culture quite quickly, I think. But we're at a time that culture has progressed so quickly that we're getting a lot of distancing between people. So, all this partisan arguing, and I think it's mostly nonsense and tribalism at work, but I think that's just something that everyone has to realize is they pick a team, and we gotta realize that, hey, we picked this team. Are we actually thinking, or are we just going along with what the team says? That's something that everybody has to ask themselves about.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think the internet is a double-edged sword because like you were saying, it can help us figure out things better because we have access to more information, but it can also help enhance tribalism more and make people just copy whatever their tribe says and stuff like that. And like you were saying, yeah, it's totally really important and more interesting, in my opinion, to figure out why someone believes what they do than what they actually believe. Because if you can understand that, then you can have a better understanding of why they would believe what they do.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that in order to do that, you have to be humble and basically about your own self-righteousness. That's the thing that gets everybody in trouble, thinking you're morally superior to anybody else. Um, I know some people would say I'm a moral relativist, but you're either a moral relativist or an absolutist. And if I was absolutist, I would be right and everybody else would be wrong. And I just don't think that's how the world works. There's areas in which I can be wrong in a certain specific moment and context, but put in a completely different context and moment, I can be right. So it's not that easy to just justify yourself on morality. It's just better to take in the whole, be humble about your opinion, and to be humble about being wrong. I think being wrong is probably the most important thing that people have to be okay with. It's okay to be wrong. I love being wrong, and the reason is if I know I'm wrong, then there's information out there that I could use to correct my trajectory. There's no sense for me to dwell on something that's incorrect because everybody in my tribe is stuck on that idea. It's almost a waste of time and resources to do so. So I'm always open to other viewpoints. Like, I'll read things that I'm not necessarily agree with. Like, I could say that I don't agree with objectivism, but I've read like a couple Ayn Rand novels in the last year or so, and there was some stuff I thought was interesting, but I definitely couldn't live my life like that, but I can understand why someone would like that considering Ayn Rand's background. So you have to get like a more complete picture instead of, this painted target that your tribe might want to paint. I know there's a lot of hate for Sam Harris, and I don't even think it's really hate, it's just criticism in our community. Like, I do think Sam Harris has a lot of interesting and smart things to say, but I just don't think he's effective at communicating in a way that will solve the problems that he's wanting to get solved.
Yeah, totally. I try to have that mindset of just being open-minded and humble too, even though like I know that I always get emotionally attached to my own opinions, but I try to avoid that as much as possible so I can learn about other opinions, especially because there have been so many times where I've just decided to have an open mind, and then I've realized that there are more to these ideas that I disagree with than I think there are, I like how I became friends with Hayden Bruce, who's a Christian who's now in mixed mental arts too, and how like probably a year or so ago, I just bought the kind of Jordan Peterson native narrative about postmodernism, and that it's just basically a whole bunch of nonsense. But then I started learning about it from talking to James Sullivan on mixed mental arts, and then reading some of the postmodernist texts, and then learning a lot about it from Thaddeus Russell and all that kind of stuff. So it's awesome to keep an open mind. And yeah, like you were saying, like oh yeah, in terms of Ayn Rand, it's so funny how tribal people are about Ayn Rand too, because I just read Atlas Shrugged relatively recently for the first time, and I thought it was an amazing book. I didn't necessarily agree with the underlying political message, but I just love it because I thought she was a great writer. And I post quotes from her sometimes, and it's funny because often people get mad at me and criticize her political ideas, but I always just say, I don't necessarily agree with her political ideas, but I think that she was a great writer. So that's why I post some of her quotes. And yeah, in terms of Sam Harris, I think I pretty much agree with you about him too. Like I still follow his podcasts, and I think he has a lot of interesting things to say about philosophy and consciousness. And like he wrote, I really like his book, Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion, because I do meditation and stuff like that, even though I'm an atheist. And also his one, Islam and the Future of Tolerance with Majid Nawaz. I don't agree with Sam Harris's perception of Islam anywhere near as much as I used to, but I think that it was good that their dialogue in that book was really interesting too.
Yeah, I'm not read at all. I haven't read any of Sam Harris. The only experience I have with him is through certain podcasts and his appearances on different media. But I think one of my favorite podcasts, just kind of refuting Sam Harris's whole mindset, is when did you ever listen to the one where Eric Weinstein went on his podcast?
On Sam Harris's podcast?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, well, Eric really knows how to break down the problem and try to solve it. And it seems like Sam was just having a lot of trouble um, conceptualizing what Eric was doing in regards with religion. Like I know,
Was that the
uh,
one with Eric Weinstein and Ben Shapiro too?
no, just Eric by himself. Because Eric came on because Sam had a really bad interview previously with I forgot who it was. It, it was definitely one that didn't go as well. It was like after the Jordan Peterson, the first one, and it was a critique on like basically Sam Harris's argument style. Like he had a couple really bad podcasts. So there's the one where he had with the I think it was a salon reporter.
Oh,
Um,
I think I heard that one that you're talking about.
yeah, there's that one. There's the one with Hannibal Buress, which was on a different podcast. I don't believe it was Sam Harris's,
Yeah,
but it
that
was
was the one where they got really at each other's throats about race, right?
yeah. But then again, Hannibal was also drunk, so yeah, what can you do? And then there was the Jordan Peterson one. So the three podcasts where Sam failed to really have a dialogue. And Eric Weinstein came on to kind of shift Sam Harris's perception and give him better tools just to speak to people about things. Because it seems like Harris rationalizes so much that he almost forgets that the people that he's talking to are culturally very different. Like Hannibal Buress is so far from Sam. There's like not a whole lot of commonality as far as culture there. Same with the salon reporter, not a lot of commonality. The most commonality he had was Jordan Peterson, but then again, Jordan Peterson's not an atheist. So, there you go. And
Did you hear the second Sam Harris podcast with Jordan Peterson where they didn't get all caught up on disagreeing about the concept of truth?
yeah, I did get to that one. But that one was like they just went on a whole different subject. They were talking mostly about archetypes and mythology, and they just kind of didn't really get into the concept of truth because that whole thing was um, it was it wasn't really resolved. I think Eric Weinstein actually resolved it for him because Eric he went back to Harris and he broke down the concept in a way that it seemed like Jordan and Harris were like speaking past each other, but Weinstein just kind of broke it up into easier digestible, understood form. But yeah, that's I don't hate the guy. It's just not I don't see exactly how he's helping things. Like if what you say is used as ammo to fuel the fire on another side, then it's not really helping, is it? You know? If you're
Yeah,
trying to help yeah,
like
if you're
any
trying to
type
help
of
solve it,
fundamentalism or extremism.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I just think if he really wants to help with that, he needs to change his approach. Just kind of drop the whole, moral superiority thing and just approach it from a different angle. 'Cause his
Yeah.
angle's obviously not working.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me about the debate we were having with Sam's Bulldog on the last Mixed Mental Arts chat, where we were talking about how you know, pointing finger pointing at the extremist Muslims who are in the Taliban or something like that. It doesn't. I mean, it's probably bad to do things like throw gay people off rooftops and not allow women to vote or drive, or perform clitorectomies on women, or stone girls to death for trying to learn to read. But like, what's the point of doing that if you don't like try to offer solutions or try to talk to people and try to find some common ground so we can perhaps more effectively try to solve these problems rather than just like highlighting them all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly, and it's usually when you think of ISIS, they're like, who do they recruit? They recruit people who didn't have a lot of opportunity in life. They're not pulling away there's a very small majority of people who are pulled away from, I would say, professional lives, but that is the extreme minority. It's mostly disaffected youth, people without opportunity. They see life as something that is not moving forward in a positive way for them. They don't have the tribe or support network. It's the same reason people join gangs. You know, they get a support network from a gang. Yes, it's brutal. Yes, it's violent. But part of human nature is needing a support network. Same thing for the school shooters. Like all of these shooters were isolated individuals, no support network that fueled their animosity towards the world. And they expressed that animosity through a mass shooting. So I think psychologically, those things are linked between the way ISIS recruits and the way that people join gangs and the outbursts of social isolation from the school shooters, the mass shooters. It's all psychologically linked to the human's need for social interaction. Like a baby, if a baby doesn't get touched by a human, it would die. A baby actually needs human touch to thrive and grow. And this is not something that an adult doesn't need. I don't say they'll need touch, but they'll need social interaction. There's very few human beings that could survive in a socially isolated state. Like even the worst punishment in prison is being thrown in the hole where you have no social contact. It's that is the worst thing that can happen to a person is to socially isolate them.
Yeah, definitely. Like, even though I'm a pretty introverted person, I do like having like meaningful relationships with a close group of friends. And that's, I think, like one of the things I like about mixed mental arts is like finding like-minded people like you and I who like seem to have a lot in common and have great conversations with each other. And yeah, it seems like a lot of school shooters and people who join ISIS and gangs and people like that are like depressed pessimists or nihilists who crave a sense of community, and that's the only place that they can get it. So they just go along, and then they just go along with the tribalism, and then it becomes a huge problem. And yeah, what you were saying too, that about how babies will die if they don't get attention, that reminded me of Robert Sapolsky saying that in his last book called Behave that I read, which is a fucking awesome book. He was talking about how if children are ignored in the crib, they grow up to develop social problems when they're adults. So like we know that we need human interaction regardless of how introverted or how like socially awkward we feel, right?
Yeah, that's certainly important. Like I would say I'm also on the introverted scale. I'm not gonna lie. I may seem maybe out there because say crazy things all the time. But it to me, introverted isn't really a negative thing. What I consider it. I'm not saying that introverted equals socially awkward. That's not what I'm saying. Like for me, being an introvert means that you expend more energy trying to be social than somebody who's an extrovert. So if someone's an extrovert, it's very natural to be around a lot of people, to take in conversations, to just be the life of the party, go around and do their thing. If I were, I've been in that situation where I had to do it, and to me, it's very taxing. Like it makes me tired. But it's not that I don't enjoy it, just talking to people and, doing some social interaction. But to me, it's not like a permanent thing because I've had various times in my life where, that has definitely switched around. Like where, I'm out every weekend, having parties and having good times with people, but then there's other parts of my life where I just want to focus on, self-improvement or just thinking about thoughts and ideas, working on personal projects. I might feel more enthusiastic towards those things than being social. Um, but yeah, for me, it's not a permanent thing. It's just sometimes it slides more one way or sometimes it slides more the other way. But as far as introvert, extrovert, whatever vert, unless you're like a crazy hermit who lives by themselves out in the woods, you're going to need some type of social interaction just to stay psychologically sane. And I just think the more you're cut off or ostracized by society, that has definite definite psychological impacts. If especially when your society is very very heavily based on invid I can't talk. I'm sorry.
Visioning?
Individualism.
Oh, individual.
Yes. So when you're doing the individualism thing here in America, which is a very, 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 very heavy mindset here, you get that disconnect. Like, if you think of where do these things happen, they're always suburbs. Suburbs are
Oh, you
probably
mean
the
the
most,
shootings?
yeah, they're all suburbs. Suburbs are some of the most disconnected places in America. Like, I remember growing up poor, we all knew our neighbors. Like, I knew all the neighbors' kids. We all went to each other's houses, it was no big deal. And I've lived in suburbs before, and nobody talks to each other. Like, it's weird. Like, I remember for 2 years, I lived in the suburb. And it was like a nice street, two-story houses, yards, picket fences, etcetera, etcetera. And I remember I was walking to my friend's house, and I had been living there for like a year. And I was walking to my friend's house. I was like, oh, yeah, quiet street. Nobody talks to each other. Don't know my neighbors. So I was walking, and me and my friend, we were like, "Hey, let's go to the arcade." So from there, we go walking to the arcade, and on the way, me and him get stopped by a cop, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, somebody called us because they told us that you guys were casing houses." And I was young. I was like, "Well, what does casing a house mean?" I'm like, "Oh, you were looking at it."
How young were you?
Huh? I was like in probably ninth grade. Like, I didn't know about crime. I didn't know what the hell casing a house meant. So so I'm like, "Well, what's casing a house?" And the cop was like, "Well, that means that you're, like, watching it to plan to steal from a place." And they're like, "Well, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm just walking to the arcade." And it's like, "Well, can you tell me what street they called?" And they're like, "Well, I can't tell you that, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Well, was it on Alaska Street? Because that's the street I live on." Like, yeah, yeah, somebody called from your street. I was like, "Well, I live on that street. Will I be planning to break on into somebody's house the same street that I live on? Does that make sense to you?" And the cop was like, yeah, well, you guys, just take care." And it was like the stupidest thing, but just to think about it, I live in a suburb and my neighbor thought I was gonna steal from them. So it's just weird. I don't know if it was a race thing. I don't think it was because we had a couple other black people who lived on that block, but
Were the cops white?
um I think so, but the cop has to respond to a call no matter what. So whether it was a white guy or a black guy, they would have had to talk to me because they have to respond to what the person calls about. So if some crazy, frantic person's like, "Oh, they're looking into my house. Oh, they're gonna steal from me." So the cop is gonna have to respond to that no matter what. They can't just like wave it off. I don't think they're allowed to wave off anything. So they're kind of required to go investigate and see what's happening. After they talked to me and understood that I lived on the street, they knew the lady was full of shit.
Yeah, that's a good point about how they have to respond to stuff, because uh, it would probably be really easy to mistake that for racial profiling, even if it isn't racial profiling. Although I'm sure racial profiling happens a fucking lot. Um,
Well, it was
but
a stop based on a call, so it's not like they were just stopping me out of the blue.
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
And yeah, to go back to what you were saying about introversion, yeah, I've felt the same way and have had similar experiences before. Like, especially if I'm with a group of close friends, I love talking to them, but it does feel like draining. Like I feel tired after that, and I've had times in my past before too, when I like go out to the bar all the time or something like that. And alcohol is a social lubricant, so it makes it feel less exhausting that way. And what were you saying after you were talking about introversion before you got into your story about the cops?
after introversion, social cohesion. So like all of the school shooters are from suburbs.
Oh, right, right. That's the other thing that I was reminded of. I think I'm not sure. It's hard to say, but I wonder if that like not getting to know your neighbors. I wonder if that's partially a cultural thing, or it could be an individual thing too. Because I know, like for me, I'm pretty sure that I've always lived in suburbs, and like just for me, because I'm not that interested in getting to know my neighbors. I've never really put that much effort into it. But my mom, because she's way more extroverted than me, she always puts a lot more effort into that than me. So maybe it's just like an individual thing, or maybe it's partially a cultural thing too. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think it's probably more cultural because you've lived mostly in Canada, correct?
Yeah, I've lived only in Canada. I've been to the States many times before when I was a kid, but I've only lived in Canada.
Yeah, the states are a bit different, as far as, like, cultural. I think when I was younger, I don't know what it was. It's probably pre-internet age. I think internet has definitely changed our social dynamics a lot. Because pre-internet, the internet wasn't really big until after I got out of high school. I was using the internet in high school, like in the early days, like 1992 was when um, high speed or Ethernet was kind of coming along. Not everybody had it, but you could get access to it like at a library or at a school. Most people had dial ups at home, but our social interactions were still face to face on the most part back then. So nobody would sit in their house and play video games and talk over a headset. You had a friend there. You always had a friend with you. And it's not till recently where, children are interacting online. I think it's still very important for them to have a lot of face to face interaction. They still have school, that's fine. But also, parenting is different from the 80s opposed to like what it is now. Like I couldn't imagine like a parent now allowing their child at 6 to go out by themselves to a nearby park and play. That was something I was allowed to do when I was 6. I could just go out of the house, go to the park next door, and just play with all the other kids, and come home when it was getting dark. Those were the rules. Nowadays, it's like, you know, if you're not gonna hear of someone sending their kid to a nearby park by themselves at 6. Even though largely the world has gotten safer for children since the 80s. So it's almost like the sensationalized media has essentially changed how people parent their children, even though the statistics say that it has gotten increasingly safer for children. But that could also be a correlation with how helicopter like parenting can occur. So if you're going to be a helicopter parent, of course, it's going to be safer for children. I don't know if that is a direct correlate or not, but I assume it definitely has some type of influence. But as a child, I had a lot of independence. When you had a bike, that was like having a car as a teenager. You could ride down to the beach, which is like, 2 miles, 3 miles away. You just say, "Hey, mom, I'm going to the beach with so and so." As long as you were with somebody, no one cared. As long as you weren't by yourself. Like I could leave to the park by myself because there were always kids out there playing. But if I was going to go beyond the park, as long as I was with some other kid, then it was fine. So
Yeah,
it's
that's a good point that you made about the media. Like, everyone's heard that cliche, "It bleeds, it leads," right? So the media's job is to like cause hysteria to a certain extent, which is like part of why I think people buy the hysteria about Trump to an extent too. Although I'm obviously not his biggest fan either. But I think I'm about like 8 years younger than you, maybe. I think I heard you say that you were 36 on one of the MMA podcasts. I'm 28, and I I had the similar experiences when I was a child too. I think part of that was maybe my parents too. Like we live like a block away from a major street with a big crossing. So my parents taught my brother and I to look both ways and press the button to get the walk signal on the at the traffic lights when we were like maybe 5 or 6 or something. And I remember like going around on my bike as a kid too. And yeah, I bet it's probably very different for most parents today. I was reminded of what you said about like being a child in the 80s, although obviously I wasn't a child in the 80s with when I watched Stranger Things, because I was thinking about how, especially at the start of the show, the kids are always like riding around on their bikes like in the middle of the night unsupervised and stuff like that. And I was thinking that would like almost never happen today, probably.
No, like, I was probably on the tail end of that era, so I could definitely, like, play at night and be out at night, but I couldn't be by myself. That was the only thing. So if I could go to somebody's house, I could sleep over, or, we could go, like, on an "adventure," quote, unquote, on our bicycles. We didn't live, like, so much in a wooded area like they did in Stranger Things. It was more like it's very hard to describe the area I grew up in. It's a suburb, but it's not like, uh, um I'd say it was a lower working class kind of suburb. It wasn't near the urban areas, because the closest urban center from where I lived as a child was, like, 10 miles north, which would be downtown San Diego. So I lived probably, I'd say, 5 miles from the Mexican border where I grew up. So in that age where I grew up, there was a lot of, social services, and in the '80s, I lived right next to, a city park. So when I say city park, that means there's a park, there's a playground, there's a soccer field, um, basketball courts, everything that a kid could wanna do, like, in the '80s. And on top of that, there was also a recreational center, so there were these city employees who basically, ran activities, like, during the day. So, um, like, they would have sports week, or, like, sports month, where the, city employees would organize all the kids in the park to play, like, soccer, baseball, basketball, all your usual sports. Each week is a different sport. They had, like, a lot of activities. They'd have some people come in and teach, like, arts and crafts classes. Like, once a week, they'd show us movies in the rec room. They also had pool tables and foosball tables, and, board games, and it was great. It was right next to my house. There was always something to do. There's always organized activities for me as a child, and I basically it was less than 100 feet away from me, and it was a big neighborhood, lots of kids. So, um, there was never that social isolation unless someone became a bully. The weird thing about our group when we were kids, is there was, like, no bully hierarchy. Is like, there's a large group of kids who love to play with each other, and then there's, like, this kinda outside entity that was a bully. So what would happen is all the kids would go up against the bully. So it was never like one kid would get bullied and then no one would help. We would all go up against the one person who's the bully. And the problem with that too is that social also social isolation for the bully. But the bully themselves, I remember the kids that would do this, that would just, like, be real assholes on the playground. Um, I don't know what they were doing that they would want to socially isolate themselves from the rest of us. Like, it was weird because the person would come in, they'd be, like, new to town or new to the area. They make friends with everybody, and then on a button, they'd turn on that person. And this bully, quote unquote, did this to many of the community kids. So it got so bad that he turned everybody in the community against him. There was this one point, I think I was probably like maybe fifth or sixth grade, that he gotten on everybody's case so bad that everybody was going after him. The rec faculty had to, like, They had to lock all of us out of the rec center and then just like wait for his mom to come to pick him up. And then they would leave. His mom would pick him up and leave. And then they would reopen. And then the guy at the rec center, like one of the employees, was like, well, I know why you guys are doing this because he's a real punk, but it's a real pain in the butt that I have to call his mom and pick him up. So can you guys could just get along? And we're like, well, he's the one that's, you know, getting on everyone's case and making fun of our moms and et cetera, et cetera. And he was like a big kid. He was bigger than most everybody else. But when you have like 10 people ganging up on you, it doesn't matter how big you are. You gotta be a cohesive part of the group. Like, I just don't understand that the mindset that you would actually isolate yourself by, um, being a bully. I, I find that really strange.
I
And
bet,
I
I
re
bet, I bet it's partially uh, like I wouldn't be surprised if it's often the case that kids who are bullies are also like bullied by their parents. So then it's like the circle of bullying. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard that before and it sounds like it makes sense. Yeah, I was bullied a lot as a kid, I remember, and and then that would be a good segue into the other thing I wanted to talk to you about because I remember in high school I was getting bullied a lot, and then one summer my friend got me into going to the gym, and then not longer after that I stopped getting bullied and I started getting more attention from girls and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons that like I'm pretty biased towards seeing working out as a really important value. And then like I've told you about before, after I did basically kind of like amateur bodybuilding style of training for a while, I got into powerlifting and then I competed in it for a few years and I got some good lifts and I competed in power or strongman events too. And I remember I competed in this one strongman event one year where we had to do the stone lifting and we had to
oh
do
man.
bar deadlift and we had to do the most difficult thing. Oh yeah, there was also a rope pull where you pull a truck towards you with a rope. And then the one thing that I couldn't do was the yoke walk where you put this bar that's attached to heavy jugs of water that are like hundreds of pounds on each side, and you have to walk with this unbalanced load for a particular distance. And I remember a year or two later, my mom still has a picture on the fridge of me doing the hardest physical challenge I've ever done in my life by far, which was at a strongman event, pulling a 48,000 pound diversified bus. They would put it in neutral, but then they would attach a harness to you and you would have to pull it. And it was super fucking hard, even in neutral, because it was so fucking heavy. And I was the smallest guy there, even though it was my powerlifting days. So I weighed 230 at the time. And I'm back down to like 170 now. But even at 230, I was by far the smallest guy there. So it was really fucking challenging to do that.
Yeah, man. That sounds super awesome. I wish I had gotten into weightlifting and like I was always into athletics and very athletic as a child. I always loved playing sports or any games where you had to run around a lot, like playing tag, hide and seek, doing races, racing on bikes. Like I always was a athletic kid. I wasn't like a super athlete, but I could hold my own in most things. Um, and my favorite classes in junior high were always PE. And I think one of my best moments was in I think it was ninth grade PE. We had teams. of predetermined teams. So we didn't get to pick our teams. I think the teachers picked our teams. And then, they try to balance out the teams, right? By sticking like the most athletic people with the least. So in my team, I was the only athletic person on the team. All my other teammates were like ASB nerds and like honors class students. So
What's
the
ASB?
ASB is Associated Student Body. So they're like the people who are in like student activities, like people who run like concession stands or they're into like school politics stuff. Not your typical, your more pensive kids, like kids who are actually trying to be intelligent at a young age, something I was not.
Yeah,
So
I wasn't either. I didn't get intelligent until like a few years after high school.
yeah, it took me many more after that. But um in this quest, so I was given basically like the worst athletes, and I was not gonna concede. I was gonna shape these guys up. Like a lot of them didn't know the rules of softball or the rules of baseball in general. So my thing was like, okay, I'm gonna be the coach. I'm gonna coach these guys like how to play. I'm gonna tell them what they'll need to do at certain times. Like say um there's a man on first, so right before the next batter comes up, I'll yell to everybody, "Hey, whoever catches the ball, throw it to second, throw it to second." This is something I had to tell everybody because they didn't know. I always took an outfielder's spot because none of them would be able to throw from the outfield. So I had to, I personally had to be in the outfield. Um, and then I coordinated, with their strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so who should be at first? Who should be at second? If we had certain batters up that I knew hit a certain direction, I would switch with the other outfielder because I know I had a better chance of catching it or at least getting the ball back infield to one of the basemen. So I worked really hard with these guys, and all the other teams definitely had a way better physical dudes on them, people, girls. It was co-ed. The funniest thing is we did have a tournament in our PE class and we won the tournament. And I was completely surprised. And the thing I found out and what I just realized later is we worked even though we're not like a physical team, we all worked together. We all helped each other out. We all, you know, we didn't yell at each other at all. Like if something messed up, okay, it's a mistake. Let's fix it next time.
How old were
Um,
you at the time, or like what grade?
I was in ninth grade, so probably like 14 or 15.
Okay.
So yeah, at that time, the funny thing is like all the teams were playing against each other. All the teams we played against, like whenever they made a mistake, they get so angry. They're pointing fingers, blaming each other. My team didn't do that. One, I hate to say it. One, it's because I had a low expectation, which was probably a good thing. Because if I had really, really high expectations for them, I'd get probably mad. But since I didn't, and I knew that I went into it knowing that we were gonna make a lot of mistakes, and not to like make anybody feel bad about the mistakes that they were making. Um, I just said, "All right, well, we can fix it. We could do better next time." And I was just like devising strategy. It was more for me, it was a strategy game more than an athletics game because I had to work with these chess pieces that were like all pawns. So it was a really interesting experience to get like this team of unathletic people to win the softball tournament. It was really funny.
That's awesome, man. It sounds like you almost had like a natural penchant for leadership as a young age. Do you want to tell me about that, what you told me about on Facebook with how you competed in a powerlifting meet?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so it was a few years ago. Yeah, I was working at Activision on Call of Duty, and I had undergone what I call dev body. Um, so what that means is working at Activision, they provide you with free meals, so you're getting free dinner, free lunch. You're sitting at a desk all day. You're not doing much, no physical activity. You got free beer, so we got like 3 beer kegs in the cafeteria. You could imagine what would happen if you went to excess in any of those areas. So what ended up happening is I think I got up to 270-ish, like 272, and I was like I didn't know I was 272. I was just like I think, what happened was because there were a couple things that happened. One, before I went to Activision, I had my gallbladder taken out. I think it was just from living an unhealthy lifestyle. It could have been, maybe I might have been healthy and it would have had to been taken out anyway. But during that time, I hadn't weighed myself in years. So I got on a scale. I think at that time I weighed probably like around 250-ish or something. It's like, oh man, that's the most I've ever weighed, not that I can think of. So I was like, all right, I kind of have to get in shape or at least do some type of exercise. So my thing was walking. So I'd walk like a mile or two a day. Um, and I was also working from home, working with an indie studio as a programmer. So I tried to make it a point that okay, I need to at least get out in the morning or in the evening and do some walking. So I had these walking apps that tracked my movements and let me know how far I was walking, how fast, how high, and I was like plateauing, but it was like pretty much maintenance. And then my girlfriend at the time, she was living in Puerto Rico and she was going to be visiting for a month and a half. And one activity she wanted to do was zip lining. I was like, oh, that sounds fun. And I go and I reserve the reservations and everything. And I look, I was like, oh, there's a weight limit. It's like, okay. So I got to step up my game. So I didn't want to be teeter tottering on the limit. I wanted to make sure I had a little bit to work with. So I think I got down to 245 and then had bad habits again. I'm probably having bad habits now as well. But what happened then, I think I got my job at Activision, became a glutton on beer and free food. And then I went back to the doctor for some reason. I think it was a follow up because I was like having pains in the area where I had my surgery. And so they weighed me and they're like, 270, man, you're a lot heavier from when you last came in. I was like, oh wow. At that point, I was like, you know what, I really have to do something. I want to get in shape. But I don't want to get in shape like I did before, where it's just like walking even before that, I was like hardcore cycling. And I remember when I was hardcore cycling, I got super skinny. I was like, yeah, I don't like the way I'm looking. Like, yeah, I lost a bunch of weight, but I look like a feeble person. So I was like, all right, let me go a different route. I always wanted to like look decent. So I started doing a lot of research. Um, the problem I always had with lifting weights is always felt like I didn't know what the hell I was doing in the gym. I thought I was just like, doing crap, but not really, knowing why I was doing the crap. So I got a 24-hour fitness membership, and I was going to the gym and doing all these like machines and exercises. And I was like totally bored. I felt like I really didn't have a goal. So I went online and I started researching, okay, I want to get stronger. What should I do to get stronger? I wasn't looking for, okay, what should I do to look like so and so? I think my first goal was just, I want to be stronger. If I'm strong, then, maybe the after effect would be, looking decent. So I look into powerlifting, and I wasn't like really actually training for powerlifting, but I was using like a similar methodology. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but do you know?
Methodology?
Yeah, methodology. Are you familiar with strong lifts
I think so.
or doing 5x5s?
Oh, I definitely know that. Yeah, five sets of five or
All
five
right,
times
so
five. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I discovered 5x5. So I was like, five doesn't sound too hard. I could do 5x5. And even though I was like a football player in high school, I rarely went to the gym, and I didn't have like a regular regimen. I would just go when my friends say, "Hey, let's go to the gym." It wasn't like a regular thing for me. And I wasn't like a strong kid. I think like my max bench in high school was like a week. It was like, what was it? I think it was just 245. So what is that? It's like 125 pounds, 130 pounds.
Which the 245?
Yeah, I think my max bench ever in high school was like 165. It wasn't that much. It was very low. I wasn't like super strong as a football player. I just did not lift weights much. Um, so anyway, I was like, that's cool. Maybe I should try lifting weights. And I downloaded this app to my phone, which is called Strong Lifts 5x5, and it basically tells you exactly what you're going to do when you go in the gym. So I didn't have to worry about it. And then you make like strength goals every single day, every single workout you add to what you're doing. So every single day, you feel like you're getting stronger because you're always pushing something heavier than you did the workout before. It wasn't stagnant like what I was doing before. It was just like, oh, whatever. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just, pushing this machine here and there. Not really keeping track of things. So this app kept track of everything down to the rest periods. So I went through this program for about 6 months. I did not plateau at all, and I wish I would have continued. I was plateauing a little bit at the military press, and it was a first plateau. It wasn't like like a maximum plateau. I was like plateauing for the first time a military press at about 125, I think, and I was not plateauing at the other exercises. All right, so I've been doing it for 6 months. Like my coworkers, like, "Oh, you lost a lot of weight." It's like, "Oh, you're looking better, man. Um, great." And then I started playing um, ultimate frisbee with them at lunch. Trying to get my cardio in. Trying to eat healthy. I had this app to count like my calories and my macros and everything. Um, every Sunday, prepared my week's worth of food, all of on Sunday. So I just cook a bunch of stuff on Sunday, um, portion it up, throw some of it in the freezer, throw some of it in the fridge, and everything I ate for that week was cooked in one day. So that's how much strict control I had over my diet at the time. So while powerlifting, so my powerlifting training only consisted of 5 exercises. So squats, rows, bench, military press, and deadlift. Those were the only 5 things that I worked out on. Occasionally, I did do some other things like dips, and I did a little bit of um, the pull down machine because I was still too fat to do pull ups and chin ups and stuff.
That's a
Um,
common problem.
what, being too fat to do pull ups?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was basically too fat to do pull ups. I I think I got down to probably like 145 by the end of my training. So I went from 270 to I'm not 245, not 145. So 270 to 245.
Oh, I was gonna say, holy shit, you lost over 100 pounds.
Oh no, I'd be a skeleton, man. I'd probably look like a Holocaust survivor if I was a 145.
Or like Christian Bale in The Machinist.
All right, so I get to the end of it wasn't supposed to be the end of my training. It just happened to be the end because um I did have a pretty jarring life change, and that kind of ended my whole workout obsession. So what happened was um there were 2 things that are happening. So my work at Activision was on contract, and me and my girlfriend had a plan would be like at the end of my contract we're going to go ahead and move in together, et cetera, et cetera. She found a very good job over here in DC, so that was the plan. But since I was like such a awesome worker, they didn't really um they didn't like my end of my work was supposed to happen in April, like contractually. But since I was like really good at my job, they opened that up. But the problem was is like I told them I'd love to stay, but I already have obligations. So what ended up, well, I was transitioning to move here. Um, like a month before I actually moved here, I flew one of my cats in, and I was just getting the feel for this area, and my girlfriend was here already, so I flew the one of the cats in, and she was going to take care of the cat. And there was a 24-hour fitness down the street. I was like, "Ah, man, I can work out here too." So I go to the 24-hour fitness, do my training. I notice I got a flyer. Uh, Flyer says powerlifting meet 2 weeks. It's like, maybe I should sign up for this. Maybe. So I mulled over it for a while. I think I asked my girlfriend first, "Hey, would you be interested in coming and watching a powerlifting meet? Maybe I might participate." So yeah, yeah, I'll do. I don't mind. I'll go ahead and watch it. So I went ahead and signed up, and that was like the first lifting meet ever. So it was a bunch of people from the gym. There was some definite gorillas there. There was this one guy, man. He was just built like a silverback. It's like couldn't believe the guy. He was like throwing up like 300 bench presses, like he was repping with them. I was like, Jesus Christ, these guys are nuts. I was like barely pushing, like, I think before I had done this meet, I tested a max out probably like a month or two before, and I had did 2 reps of 225. I was very proud because that was the most I've ever did since high school. It's like, okay, I'm progressing here. So we go to the meet. The night before the meet, I didn't know what my maxes were, so I had to figure it out. Um, I did figure out with my squat what my squat was approximately, and then I figured out what my deadlift was, but I did not do bench because I was just too tired, trying to max out
So you
on
didn't do a training program leading up to the meet?
yeah. The meet was just something I did because, hey, it's been 6 months. I should test out what I can do. So, just the day before the meet, though, I didn't know any of my maxes, and when you go to a meet, you gotta basically tell them what you're gonna do. So, I didn't wanna do a bunch of failure stuff. I wanted to actually know what I could do so I could do it, at least something successfully, and then if I put more weight on and I fail, so be it. At least I know what I have done before at a maximum. So the day before the meet, I max squat and I max squat at I think it was like it's like 95 or something. And then I did a max deadlift. It was like 440 around there. I didn't max bench because I didn't have time, and I figured, okay, so I did max bench a couple months ago. That was 225. Maybe I could do a little more than that. I'll just try that. So I go to the meet. Uh, I do my lifts. The first lifts I did were all easy. Like they're all numbers I knew I was going to get that would be impossible to fail. So I did that for all my lifts except bench because I was just guessing at that point. My bench was actually difficult, and I think it was like one. I don't remember. I have to look at the video again, but I did struggle with bench quite a bit. So I did my easy thing to at least get on the scoreboard. For the second one, for squat, I attempted my max again. I did that, and then I put a little bit more on top of the max, and I did that. I was really proud. So the squat was our first thing. Second was
So
bench.
did you get 400 or 4 plates on squat, or did you get 395?
No, I got 4 plates on squat.
4 plates is a good milestone.
Yeah. Yeah, so I got 4 plates on squat. Oh, my bench sucks so hard. I hit 145, and I think I attempted, like, 175 next. I, like, totally failed, and then after that, I attempted, like, 165, and I failed that. I felt, like, so bad. Um, and then, the last thing was the deadlifts. There was this one dude who deadlifted, like, 600 pounds. I was like, "Jesus Christ." And the guy was, like, smaller than me, and I was, like, really impressed. Um, and this is something that I didn't know, because when you deadlift, do you do sumo or just straight up?
I always did conventional stance. I tried sumo stance a few times, but it just seemed a lot more challenging to me.
Yeah, I think I probably would have done better sumo because my legs are a bit stronger. Because I know with sumo, you use more of your legs than your back, from what I've been
Are you a
told.
taller person too?
Yeah, I'm tall. I'm like 6'1".
Oh yeah, sumo is generally better for taller people too because it helps you hinge more. It helps you create a better lever with your legs because your hips are closer to the bar that way.
Yeah, I would never train sumo though. That just doesn't seem like you're working the right muscles. Um, Sumo is something I would only do for something like that, you know, just to get a max out, but I'm not really interested in the max out. I'm really interested in strengthening specific muscle groups. So I was trained conventional for the deadlift.
What type of grip did you do?
I did at first because I was using wraps. I did a regular. grip. I didn't do an alternate grip. And I knew like coming up to the competition that they weren't going to let me use wraps. So that's another reason why I wanted to like max before because I didn't want to like drop the bar. So during my training, I did do an alternate grip because I wasn't going to have the opportunity to use my wraps. Um, so yeah, during training, I would use wraps. In the competition, I just use an alternate grip.
When
Um,
my in my earlier meets, I would always compete with alternating grip on deadlifts, but then later on I found out that that can sometimes lead to bicep injuries a lot. So I trained myself to do this super hardcore thing called hook grip, where you wrap your thumb underneath the bar and then you wrap your fingers over top of your thumbs. So it really fucking hurts your thumbs, especially when you're not used to it. Like I remember even like ripping the skin off of the tops of my thumbs a few times, but I just like trained myself to do that hook grip because I thought it was like more biomechanically advantageous, and I was still in my like super hardcore like I'm a badass power lifter mindset back then too.
oh, you mean like how you grip with your fingers? I use the same grip I did for military lifts, which I think is similar to what you do. I don't I didn't put my thumb opposite of my fingers. I put them with my fingers, so it's like a big claw or a hook.
Yeah,
That's how I
that's just a normal grip. Did you use your thumbs on the bar though, or did you have your thumb like next to your hand and not really use it?
um I didn't really use my thumb for leverage. I just smashed it to my index finger.
If you still like use your thumbs, like if you still wrap your thumbs around the bar a little bit, it's just like regular grip, or I'm not sure what it's actually called. But if you like literally deliberately avoid using your thumbs, that's called monkey grip because monkeys don't use their thumbs.
Okay, I wasn't using my thumbs. I placed my thumbs with my finger, but I wasn't actually wrapping my thumb on the bar. I wasn't using it as a grip at all. I was just putting my thumb out of the way, so I could use the hook. Like that was one of the problems I was having when I was first doing military press. I was actually just holding it normal with my thumb um, opposite my fingers as like having wrist problems. So I was reading starting strength to get like some better information on just like lift mechanics, and I was
That's by
watching like
Mark Ripto, right?
yeah, I was also watching a lot of his videos for military press. I spent so many freaking hours watching like lifting videos. It's ridiculous. Like people would just think like I was a stupid meathead watching people like lift weights, but the main reason I was doing it because I didn't want to hurt myself, man. I did not want to like mess my back up for life. Like, I heard so many horror stories, and I was like, I really, really do not want to hurt myself. So I want to try to do everything as safely as possible, you know, as best I can. So as soon as my wrist started hurting from military press, I knew that I was probably holding the bar wrong. And my the thing about my wrists is they're just not normal, like shaped. So I was watching some Mark Ripito videos about
How are
um
your wrists shaped differently?
like the outside is really bulge, like a really big bulge on it. And my wrists in general are just kind of weak. Like they're weak. So like I couldn't hold the bar without doing a monkey grip with like on heavier weights for military press. It would just hurt my wrists too much. So I have to do like a monkey type grip for presses. And
Did you do that
eventually,
for deadlifts too?
yes, I didn't use my thumbs for I didn't use it for presses or for deadlifts.
That must have been hard on deadlifts because it seemed I think it's like really hard to grip the bar without your thumbs, like to hold on to it, especially when the weight gets a lot heavier.
Well, that was something I had to figure out because most of my training was done with wraps. So when I was using the wraps, I'd actually use a normal grip using my thumb because the wrap created like a really, really thick grip. So it felt a little bit more natural than just holding a bar. So I didn't really do the monkey grip until after I was training without wraps, as I was just having a lot of problems with my thumbs because I was um, a lot of problems with my thumbs with deadlifting. It was just like I felt like I was going to drop the bar at any time. Um, but then again, I knew I needed to train strength in my hands for deadlifting. So I would do like half my sets with wraps and then half of them without. So I'd start without the wraps and then end with them. But I never did like full sets with pure like unwrapped because I had a lot of warm up sets. So I do all my warm ups without the wraps, and then once I got to my working set, I put the wraps on usually.
That's a good way to do it, especially it sounds like maybe you had some wrist mobility issues, so that's probably a good way to try to work around it.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think it's just because I got long arms. Like having long arms is definitely not a good thing when you're doing like military presses and bench lifts. It's more of a handicap more than anything.
It's good for deadlifts to have longer arms though, but not if you have those wrist issues as well.
Yeah, my wrist never bothered me with wraps. It was only like without wraps. Like it didn't really bother me for deadlifting. The only time my wrists ever bothered me was for military presses. It didn't bother me for bench presses. I think it's just the awkward stance that you take when you're doing military presses because it's just a vertical press. And if you think about it, the way you're pushing up the bar is not like you're doing a bench press because your arms are outward and you have more leverage. When you're doing it from a standing position and the bar is in front of you, and you have to hold that bar, it's just a different weight distribution. I felt like when I was bench pressing, um, to hold the bar up wasn't as difficult as it was for doing standing military presses because you're just using your body you're using just your body. If you're doing a bench press, you're using the bench for stability. I'm just
Yeah,
using my body. And it was funny too, because like towards the later half of like my training, like getting heavier and heavier weights, I started to ditch my shoes. So I was like, I didn't like working out with shoes anymore. So there was a point where, the people are working at the gym, oh, you have to wear shoes, you have to wear shoes. And they're like, I know it feels a lot better to not wear shoes, but we have rules here. I was like, all right, put my shoes back on. So the shoes I'd usually wore were just like flat soled skater shoes or something of that nature. Something with a
yeah.
really kind of not, I didn't want anything with that had a sole that had a lot of give in it, just like a really solid sole that was flat. Something that could simulate standing on the ground as much as I could.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's with military press in terms of bench press that kind of makes sense because you're pushing it straight up and down more, so maybe you're like fighting gravity a little bit more. So that could potentially explain why it feels more difficult on your wrist, because it might make it more difficult for the wrist to either sit back farther on your hand more, especially if you're not using your thumb, or to like keep it forward without having it too forward. Like technique is tricky. And with in terms of shoes too, especially like for deadlifts in particular, I remember that always in competition when I was powerlifting, I would wear like flat shoes like Converse All Stars, and like even take the insoles out of those so I could be as close to barefoot as possible. And I remember when I was doing squats, I would have like Olympic weightlifting shoes that have literally a wooden sole on them, so the complete opposite of that. But since I stopped powerlifting, I always try to be as close to barefoot as possible because that's more natural. But I remember when for powerlifting, there was something about how having more of a sole, even though it changes your mobility a lot, it can help you squat more once you get used to it. But yeah,
Yeah, I think it was for me. It was just I don't know, it just felt better barefoot. I felt like I can control my body better belt barefoot. Like I had just more intimate control over my movements because you're completely um it's like you and the ground are one and there's no middleman. It's weird. It's like a
yeah,
weird way
yeah,
it's a weird way to explain it, but you just feel like you have more control, so to speak. And then
yeah,
the
yeah.
other
One of the
problem go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. The one of the things that Kelly Starrett says, who's like a really well-known strength and conditioning coach, and has this website called Mobility WOD, which is mobility workouts of the day. He talks about how good it is to be barefoot, and how like like what you were describing, how it makes you like one with the ground. Like it helps you grip the floor more. And one of the things that Kelly Starr talks about is how, especially in the 80s, when running shoes started to be marketed with this big cushiony sole, especially on the heel, it started to make people run and walk in a completely evolutionarily unnatural way, because like most people walk kind of duck footed because of those shoes, and they have their feet turned outwards, and then they heel strike with their heels. But like technically the proper way to walk and run is to land on the balls of your feet. So if you like try to walk and land on your tippy toes, if you're used to landing on your heels, you can land on the balls of your feet. And you're supposed to like have a natural spring in your step, and even like use hip thrusting motions and like strut while you're walking, stuff like that. That's like the more natural way to actually walk and run.
Yeah, it was also from like hundreds of hours of, consuming weightlifting media and seeing that a lot of people had recommended like a very thin sole or doing it barefoot. And I did see the difference, and I think I switched because one of the reasons why is um I think I was struggling during a set, and I was just trying to see if there was, like, any little improvement I could do to, like, get past it, trying to do these incremental improvements, and I thought, being barefoot would help, and it did, for me at least at that time. And as far as, like, military presses, like, another thing is, like, it's a larger range of motion as well, so, if you think about how far apart your arms are when you're doing bench. When you're doing, a military press, your arms are closer. So your arms are at shoulder length for,
Yeah, especially if you do like the common powerlifting style of bench press, like the way that I learned to do it when I was competing in powerlifting is to have my grip as wide as possible. And also one thing that I learned how to do was like to put an arch in my back and to push my traps into the back as much as possible, but push my butt into the bench as much as possible too. So you create an arch, and the idea behind that is to make make yourself as thick as possible so that the bar, especially with you if you have a wider grip, to make the bar travel as short of a distance as possible, which probably isn't good for your long-term back health, but that was like what we all did when we were training in powerlifting.
No, I definitely did use that. I did watch a lot of videos and instruction about benching for powerlifting. You only want your butt and shoulder blades touching the bench, and it's like really
Yeah.
super awkward at first. Yeah, I did switch over to my phone. I'm going mobile right now, but yeah, I didn't typically train like that. Like when I did train, I didn't really train like I was training for powerlifting. It's just like the exercises I was doing were geared to that. So when I was doing bench, the only time I did do the shoulders and butt deal was when I was figuring out my max, and that's when I would use that method. Same thing with like if if I really wanted to pull some heavy weight with my body style, I probably should have been doing sumo deadlifts. But that's just not the way I trained. I was just training mainly. I just loved how much, compound lifts just like destroy your body after a workout. Like you're not doing like all these little isolation exercises. You're just doing these big compound lifts and you're working so many muscles at once. Like that was one of my main things that I loved about it was that you're only focusing on these few lifts, but they're targeting so many muscle groups. And it's like a really, really efficient way to use your time in the gym if you're not trying to like be a bodybuilder and isolate specific muscles. And it was great. I just really loved doing those nice, large compound lifts that just work your entire body. It was really fun.
Yeah, I like that a lot too when I was doing that. And even now, even though I don't train for powerlifting anymore, I kind of do like a variety of different things. I still do like more functional type of movements, so more like compound type of movements like that. And I remember like switching over from like amateur bodybuilding style to powerlifting style, feeling that same way too. I at first had to like fight my bias because I was like, yeah, but bench press doesn't work my shoulders in the way if I do like cable crossover things, and I'm not working my calves at all. but but eventually I just got into such the biased powerlifter mindset where I would just follow along with my friends who would call bodybuilders baddie builders instead, and they would say like, you know, bodybuilding's gay and stuff like that. So
Well, it's funny because on occasion, like we did have a couple people at my job that were like going to the gym and lifting weights. One of them, he was definitely like a bodybuilder type who had like arms day and legs day and that type of routine. But my routine was basically every single day I went press and deadlifts. Those were my alternating workout days. If I was really feeling really good, I'd do like 4 days a week. Um, so that would be every other day I'd work out.
I lost
Uh,
your
if,
audio for a second. Could you go back to what your days were, your workout days?
oh, my workout days, if I was feeling really good, it was 4 a week. And that was um, It was like every other day I'd work out. If I was feeling not so great, it would be 3 days a week, but that wasn't common. One of the things I also loved about 5 by 5 is that I didn't have to go to the gym every day. Like I only
Yeah,
had to
it's
go to
like
the gym every other day.
yeah, it was like every second day or 3 days a week or something like that, right?
Yeah, so you only go every other day. I felt like I was really maximizing my time. Um, and just, I didn't know how important that rest day was. Because before I was like lifting weights every day, and like it felt like as you go on, it just gets worse and worse. As you just feel like, oh man, I'm so tired from yesterday, and then I have to go lift these weights today. But once I got into like the 5 by 5 system and doing every other day, um, it felt great. Unless after the meet though, it took me like a month to
Oh yeah, yeah. Meat day is really challenging always because you have to do
but
like
I was
the
like, oh.
yeah. Sorry?
Like directly after the meet, I couldn't like go back to the normal weights I was pushing for like a month.
Yeah, I usually like to take like at least an extra few days off, or I would do what's called a deloading week after a meet, which I would always do leading up to a meet too, which is just like not hitting anything close to max numbers, just doing like mostly warm-up sets. And so like and like on meet day, you're maxing out your squat, your bench press, and your deadlift. And normally in your training, you only max out like one of those on a particular day, definitely not three of them, right? So it's a hell of a lot more taxing on your muscles and on your nervous system. So you need a lot more time to recover from the beating that you put on your body, right?
Yeah, and at that point, like my working sets that I had been working up to, they weren't that heavy. Um, like at that time when I was doing before the meet, my working set for like squat was like maybe I was probably up to 245 at that time. I was strictly following the recommendation of the app, which was to add 5 pounds every time for squat and 10 for deadlift. So at that point in my training, and the funniest, I don't know if you'll think it was funny, but when I started the training, I started at absolutely zero. So I must have looked like a stupid douchebag when I got into the gym. I was like benching the bar, squatting the bar. um,
No, that's a good
yeah,
thing to do, man, because it's like you don't want to get overzealous and injure yourself.
well,
Like,
that's what I was so afraid of. I just didn't want to jack myself up. So I did start from the very, very beginning. I didn't want to look cool in front of everybody at expense of my health. So I did actually start just with the bar when I started training. So by the time I was about to get ready for um, the meet, my squats were only at 245 working sets. I think um, my military press was probably like at 125 or something like that. And then my I think my deadlift was like at 260, or maybe a little bit more. But they were nowhere near my working weights were nowhere near my maxes at all.
oh
And
wow.
this was
So how did you figure out what numbers you were going to use at the meet?
right before the meet. Um, right before the meet, I didn't do my regular 5 by 5. Instead of doing a 5 by 5, I did a bunch of sets that were 1 rep sets, and I added like 10 pounds to it.
Oh, okay.
So Yeah, so imagine doing a warm-up set, but it's just a warm-up set ad infinitum. So, because with your warm-up, you start low and you keep adding, for your warm-ups. Like, I seriously, like, if I was deadlifting, I'd have like 7 or 8 warm-up sets.
Yeah, that's probably a
So
good
it
idea.
was,
So you did
yeah,
like
so it's
singles.
basically,
So you did like singles with increasing weight.
yeah, until I maxed, until I couldn't get it up anymore. Well, I didn't even get to the point where I couldn't get it up anymore because I was by myself without a spotter.
You always
And
want to get it up.
well, you know what I mean. I
Yeah, I
didn't
know
want
what
to.
I
I
know
didn't
what
want to
you
hurt myself. I didn't want to hurt myself. I was just trying to get to like, okay, this seemed like really hard by myself, and I think if I added 5 more pounds, I might fail. That's when I would. That's what I would determine what my max would be.
that's probably a good way to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
so right
remember.
before the meet, I had to determine what my maxes were because my working weights were nowhere near, and I knew my working weights were nowhere near my maxes, but that's what I had to do because that's what the app tells me to do. I wasn't going to go rush ahead of the app. I was just going to do what the app told me to do. So I had to
Yeah, a
go
lot.
ahead and figure out what my maxes were, and then that's how I did it the night before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, more like the way that powerlifters generally seem to do it, like what I would do when I was competing is a periodization program. So you would do like a 1 rep max, and you would calculate percentages based off of that 1 rep max, and then you would use those percentages for your numbers for your sets leading up to the meet. And then it would be like probably like maybe 2 or 3 months leading up to the meet. You would start off at like more sets, more reps, like even do 10 sets of 10 at the start sometimes, and then work your way to like to like 3 sets of 3, and then 2 doubles sometimes. And then I would max out like a week, or probably like usually 2 weeks I would max out on all 3 of the lifts before the meet. And then I would do like a deloading phase, like a more easy phase the week before the meet to give myself a break. And then the idea would be to go max effort and maybe even do better than I did during my testing week when I competed in the meet. And that's how a lot of powerlifters seem to do it. I think the periodization type of program was mainly popularized by Ed Cohen, who's like a really famous American powerlifter. I think he was only like 5'2", and he got world championships in I think 3 different weight classes, like 200, the 200-pound weight class, then the 220-pound weight class, then the
Jesus,
240-pound
five
weight class.
two.
Yeah, he's so short, and you can see his hands in videos sometimes. He has hands like fucking as big as my head. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but he has giant hands and giant feet, and he has really long legs and arms in spite of being so short. So he had a really good body type for powerlifting.
It's like a real life dwarf.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I really loved doing that. I think so because of all the changes that I've had in my life. I don't really have the time to dedicate the 2 hours every other day that I would dedicate before to the gym. It was funny when I first started out doing the 5x5, like my I'd only spend like 5 minutes, like 45 minutes in the gym at the very beginning because everything was so easy and quick. But by the time I was getting up to those working sets, I was like spending 2 hours in the gym. And I wasn't doing any more or less sets than I was doing when I started. It's just the weight goes up and the resting periods increase.
yeah. That makes sense for it to be harder, and for you to want to have longer rest periods for heavier weight. If you're interested in doing like how you're talking about how the simplicity of more efficiently using your time. I've heard about like really interesting workouts from people like Tim Ferriss, for example. Maybe you've heard about like how his like the absolute simplest exercise that he recommends to people is just getting a kettlebell and doing like as many kettlebell swings as you can, or even like up to 100 reps, and then you basically do one set and then you're done, because kettlebell swings are kind of similar to deadlifts. I was gonna take a picture and send it to you. I think I still will at some point, of this kettlebell I got from On It a long time ago. It was super expensive because it was $200 before shipping, and I think the
Oh
shipping
God.
itself cost like $300 because it's a 72
What?
pound kettlebell. So it's super expensive to ship, and it's such an awesome badass kettlebell though. It's a gorilla kettlebell that you can get from On It. So it's got like an angry gorilla face on it, and I love it just because it's an awesome badass piece of workout equipment.
Oh, so you got one of the grade 8 kettlebells?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I,
I was actually thinking of getting a kettlebell because one, I'd be able to work out from home, and there's like a lot of stuff you could do with kettlebells apparently. So
yeah, I do like
um,
usually like one or two out of the three or so workouts I do a week are with kettlebells or involve kettlebells in some way, because you can do like swings, you can do rows, you can do overhead presses, you can do Olympic weightlifting movements like snatches and clean and jerks, and you can do these things called goblet squats, which are a really hard form of squat to do, where you hold the kettlebell upside down. So you hold the handles like the handle in front of your chest, and then the weight is above it, so it's even more unbalanced than it normally is that way. So it makes it
mhm.
really hard to do squats that way. Those are really fun to do too.
Yeah, I was thinking of getting some kettlebells soon and just like trying to get some work because I gotta like once you have a kid, you gotta find time to do like physical activity. And I always prefer doing it outside the house or in a gym, but I'm gonna have to see if we can get some kettlebells and find a way to work out indoors in my own home.
Yeah, and if you don't want to spend like a fortune on getting fancy gorilla ones and stuff, you can usually get like just simple ones at any random sports store. Like I think I got my first 30-pound one just from Sport Check, and then I
Mhm.
ordered a few 60-pound ones from this place called Flamin' Fitness in town. But there are lots of places where you can get them for like way cheaper than $500 for one kettlebell.
Mhm. Yeah, because I remember like the only equipment I bought for my training was chalk. I had my shower slippers. I had my wraps, all the supplements I was taking, and I bought some half-pound plates because our gym didn't have half-pound plates, and I needed them for certain incremental stuff. Like I knew I was going to need them pretty quickly with the military press because I was doing my first early plateau on that. So that was like the only stuff I had. I didn't really have a whole lot. And then I had my gym shirts, my
Yeah,
modified gym shirts.
you can do a lot with just even just like one kettlebell and like a pull-up bar if you want to, and you can do lots of like body weight style exercises too. What I like to do now usually is kind of like a CrossFit or Metcon style body weight workout once a week, and then the same kind of style of workout with kettlebells, and then once a week I do like a heavy strength training, like powerlifting style workout too. And I've started doing like jogs in the forest more recently too, because I'm still getting over my bias against cardio from when I was a power lifter. Just like say just like saying like running's gay, running's for fags, don't run. Why would you run? Just go deadlift.
Yeah, I was in the same mindset too. Like I was like, oh, running's gonna make my muscles shrink. Yeah, so I didn't. I did. But they went to, even though I only technically worked out every other day, I did go to the gym every day. On my off days, I did high intensity interval training because I didn't want to jog. I did want to do some type of cardio, but I wanted to do something that wasn't going to like deteriorate my gains from the previous day. So I figured, I figured high intensity interval training had like a happy medium there where you can just like run a sprint for a minute and just kind of walk for a while and then run a sprint. And then you have your nice mix of a little bit of cardio. But yeah, I didn't really jog on my off days. If I wasn't doing high intensity interval training, I was just doing cycling, like on the cycle machine.
Yeah, cycling's good too. And high intensity intervals are also like a super useful way to work out also. If for sprints, there's this thing called the Tabata protocol where I think it's something like you sprint for 30 seconds, then you take a 10-second break, then you sprint for 30 seconds again, and then you take a 10-second break, and you just do that until you do 4 sprints. So it takes like hardly any time at all.
Yeah, mine was a little different. I did minute sprints. So I do a sprint for a minute, and then like a walk for a minute, sprint for a minute, walk for a minute. I only did this for 10 minutes, so I do 5 sprints.
Yeah,
And then
that's a good workout.
yeah, and then I'd do that, and then because if it was an off day, I would only spend like an hour at the gym, and then when I was done with that, I'd just go to the sauna.
Sauna is great to do after workouts too. I started doing that more recently because I go to the pool with my friends sometimes. And I heard recently, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who I heard about from Joe Rogan's podcast.
Heat shock proteins.
Yeah, heat shock proteins. Yeah, the sauna is so good to do, like especially right after a workout for that. So I try to do that as often as possible. And then when I can't, I do this thing that I call kind of the poor man's isolation tank, like like Joe Rogan talks about a lot. So I kind of combine like the isolation tank ideas with the heat stress ideas, and I make like a really super almost unbearably hot Epsom salt bath. And then the Epsom salt bath is good for you because it puts magnesium right into your skin too. And then I light incense like a hippie, and I turn off the lights, and I just meditate in the hot Epsom salt bath. When I told one of my female friends about that, she said, "Andrew, that's the girliest thing you do." I'm like, "Yeah, probably."
So it's an Epsom salt bath.
Yeah, but I think like the incense is the girly part. I used to sometimes do it with scented candles too, so that could be considered girly too.
Oh, the incense part. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, incense. What are you trying to do? Meditate in there?
Yeah, I usually meditate in there.
Okay. Well, I guess poor man's isolation tank. I guess that works. Yeah, after working out, I'd either do a jacuzzi or sauna, one of those two, and then take a shower and leave, go to work. But sometimes I wouldn't even be able to complete like my whole workout routine before work, so I'd go during lunch to finish. Like usually it was the deadlift day that I had to finish, and I didn't complete my deadlifts for the day. But
That's fair enough. Yeah.
But I'm trying to get back healthy again. I gotta stop eating sugar.
Sugar is very addictive.
Yep. It is. It's ridiculous. It's funny because, like, when you're off sugar, I was actually doing keto for a while. I wasn't working out, or I was just doing keto. It's hard doing keto if you have a family because you got to cook, and not everyone's going to eat like you. So it's like you're cooking two different things. So it was getting out of hand. So I just like, I'll go back to normal. And now I've just been eating way too much like carbohydrates. It's ridiculous. So I'm trying to go back to like cutting out my carbs again, like it was before.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I think like around the time that I stopped competing in powerlifting, I kind of gradually learned about and gradually transitioned to more of a paleo style diet. And then I just coincidentally kind of just gradually transitioned from there to more of a ketogenic diet. And then I do more like intermittent fasting now. But for me, sugar was the thing that was harder to stop eating than anything else. Like it probably took me 2 years to stop eating some sort of like decadent dessert every night, even though my diet was like really healthy otherwise. And but for me though, it was less of an issue in terms of cooking for the rest of the family and stuff because um, my mom cooks most of the time, and at first like I would just cook something myself if I wasn't eating what everyone else was having, but then gradually, because without even really intending to, I lost weight from powerlifting from that diet, and partially because I stopped lifting heavy weights so much too, so I lost muscle mass too. My both my parents noticed how much weight I lost being on that kind of diet. And then eventually my mom started following kind of similar diet principles. So she just cooks meals that are similar to my diet most of the time now. And then and she lost a bunch of weight by following that kind of diet too. And then more recently, my dad started following that type of diet too, and he lost a bunch of weight too. So it's a lot more easy for all of us now here in our house in terms of cooking.
Yeah, I don't eat like completely horribly, but when you get my age, your metabolism isn't as good as it was. So, like right now, I don't drink anything with sugar in it. Um, so I don't have a problem with that. It's just, stuff like cheesecake or a muffin, that stuff is hard to break. Like for breakfast, the only thing I eat are eggs, nothing else. I don't eat
Eggs are good.
toast or anything with it. It's just eggs, butter, salt and pepper. And then lunch, I don't know. It depends because when you're cooking for the whole family and there's leftovers, you feel bad because you know no one else is going to eat the leftovers and you don't want to waste it. So I'll usually end up eating it, which is not something usually not great because usually when I cook, I'll cook like meat, vegetables, and some grain. So like a bread or a rice. And I usually only eat the meat and the vegetables for dinner. I don't eat like the rice or whatever bread side it is. But if they don't eat it all, I feel like obligated to finish it for lunch the next day because I know they're not going to eat it. So it's like a lost cause in that regard. So it's
Yeah.
right now it's me just trying to like curtail my sugar urges. Um Really, that's all it really is. I think it's just me trying to curtail my urges for sugar. It's just like whenever I cuz my wife and my daughter, they love their cookies. They love their snacks. I see those snacks and I want to eat them. But the funny thing is like when they were on vacation, they went on vacation to Puerto Rico for like a month and almost 2 months, and I stayed here because I had to work. And I didn't have any snacks in the house. It was just like what my snack was like cheese. It wasn't like, oh, some chips, some, nice tasty sugary treat. I had really basic stuff in the house, and I did that on purpose. It's like I am only buying the basics, so vegetables and meat, and that is it. And that's all I ate for like a month and a half, and I lost like 20 pounds, almost 20 pounds.
Wow, that's good for you. Yeah,
Yeah, but
sugar's really hard to kick for sure. Like it's super addictive. That's the one thing when like I take a day off once a week when I just like don't do any creative work or any tutoring or anything like that, and I try to not stick strictly to my diet, although I usually just happen to anyway. But the one thing that I binge on that one day a week is sugar. I'm like, I want candy and cookies and cake and more. Oh, ice cream too. Great idea.
yeah, sugar is just the hardest thing to deal with. Like, to me, it's just sugar and it's like pasta too, and bread and stuff like that. Like, that's hard to deal with as well. Especially since pasta is such a cheap and easy, dinner. It's such a cheap and easy, quick dinner to make for everybody.
Yeah.
But then it's also not so great
You
for
can
you.
get some gluten-free pasta. Some of it tastes like fucking dog shit, but some of it tastes fairly good. But some of that is because I think my taste buds have adjusted to eating like gluten-free things sometimes, because there's a particular type of gluten-free bread that I like, but my parents think that it tastes disgusting. So I think part of it is that like once you get used to having a different diet, it seems like your taste buds tend to adapt too, and that seems to happen with a lot of other people too.
Well, when I was on the keto kick, I did try to make some coconut flour bread. I made it right, but I just didn't like it. It just tasted like sawdust. I was like, not so great. But yeah, I was just cooking mainly with like eating a lot of really pure things, just like vegetables and meat. I basically cut out all the processed food out of the kitchen, like any instant things that you make in a box or microwave. No, I was just like throwing vegetables and meat together, eating that, eating lots of eggs, um, you know, cooking with butter, cooking with olive oil. I actually did have a pasta substitute that I actually like, which is spaghetti squash. So I was making
Oh,
like
yeah, that's
spaghetti
great.
squash. Yeah, I love spaghetti squash. And I made like, shrimp linguine with spaghetti squash, and that was fine. But it is like a pain in the butt to deal with that because it's with pasta, you just drop it in boiling water and it's done 3 minutes later. And spaghetti squash, you got to put it in the oven for like 30 minutes, and then you got to make sure you put oil on the pan, and then you got to like strip it out with a fork, and then depending on how much you make, you like it could be too much just because of how big some of the spaghetti squashes are. And this is harder to prepare. So like when they were on vacation, I didn't mind because I wasn't preparing for anybody at any one set time. So you get to cook whenever you want, whenever you're hungry. But when you're taking care of a family, you fall into a schedule. Like you start cooking at this time and you finish cooking at this time. And if you start late, you got to figure out, okay, what's something quicker? Like I'm not cooking like super unhealthy stuff, but there's just some things that I use for convenience, like pasta or Pasta is probably the worst thing I cook. Most of the other stuff is pretty okay. It's just like steamed vegetable, meat, and some grain that I usually don't eat. But I get caught in the trap of wanting something sugary late at night.
Some of the like the supposedly healthier types of carb sources, at least like according to my understanding from people like Dr. Rhonda Patrick and reading books about this and stuff, that I usually eat are either white rice or squash like you were talking about, or sweet potatoes, or even just regular potatoes sometimes too, and just like bake them in the oven. Or with rice you can just cook it in the microwave too, and they all, the squash and sweet potatoes and regular potatoes taste really awesome with butter, and the regular potatoes taste awesome with butter and dill on them too.
Yeah, I wasn't cooking a whole lot of potatoes. I did do sweet potato. Um Sweet potato is fine. For me, I like that. I do have a problem with rice because one, I overeat rice. So I try to stay away from it because I just eat too much of it. Like if I eat something, like half the plate will be rice, and that's probably not too good for you. I'd rather have half a plate of vegetables and half a plate of rice.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. You can try to like eyeball the things to have whatever ratios you want to have too. But like for me, I usually have like I guess I probably have like a decent amount of protein usually on my plate of whatever type of meat or protein that we're having, and then maybe that's like usually about a third, because I kind of have a slightly higher protein diet than most ketogenic people tend to have. And then I also usually have maybe a third of the plate is some sort of cooked vegetables, and then maybe a third, or so usually a little less than that, is of like either rice or sweet potatoes or any of the other carb sources that I mentioned. But that was from like me gradually making a whole bunch of different alterations to my diet too, because I experimented with a whole bunch of different ways of doing it from reading lots of different books and stuff like that.
Yeah, for me it's salad, like a lot of it. Like for instance, I don't know if you want to call it my dinner, but I'm not really going to eat it till probably around midnight. But it's going to be a salad with, I don't know, like oil dressing, egg salad, and like fried onions. And that's what I eat. There's a salad with a bunch of egg salad on it. And
Oh,
it's
okay.
like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
the egg salad that I like.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I usually have a giant salad every day too, and put like unsalted nuts and hemp and like olive oil and apple cider vinegar and a whole bunch of different spices and stuff on it too, and it actually tastes pretty good, I would say. But
No, I
yeah,
love it.
salad is a good idea too,
Yeah, just
obviously.
like
You can find a whole
egg
lot of
avocado.
nutritionists who say no, don't eat salad.
Well, it's not the actual lettuce that makes a salad. It's the other stuff. Like I understand nutrition because salad itself, like lettuce has like zero nutritional value. It's just a filler pretty
Yeah,
much.
it's like a vehicle for micronutrients, but there's a much higher micronutrient density in other things like kale or spinach than lettuce, right?
Yeah, they say though that kale you're not, or I'm sorry, spinach you're not really supposed to eat uncooked, from what I understand.
Oh, I think that I've heard something about that. I think um, I heard Dr. Rhonda Patrick explaining about this. Some people think that it can lead to an underactive thyroid if you eat a whole bunch of raw spinach. So that's why some people cook it. But if I understand correctly, that's pretty much only the case for people who already have an underactive thyroid. So if you already have an underactive thyroid and you eat a whole bunch of raw spinach, then it can exacerbate that problem. But if you don't have an underactive thyroid already, then apparently you can eat a whole bunch of raw spinach as long as you don't eat like a fucking insane amount of it, and it probably won't lead to those thyroid issues, if that's what you were talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know exactly what it was, but it's probably that. Yeah, for salad, for me, is what's important is what goes on it. It's not the lettuce. Like, I could care less. It just feels weird eating the stuff on a salad by itself without the lettuce. Like, it's just the lettuce is there just as a vehicle. I want my egg salad, I want my cheese, I want my onions, I want my salad dressing. It's salad, the lettuce itself. I would eat a salad without the lettuce, but it's just gonna be a mess.
Yeah, it's just kind of like it's kind of easier to get like mixtures of different stuff in the salad on your fork if you kind of like have some lettuce in there too, because it can stick to the lettuce and make it easier to put on your fork or your spoon or whatever you're eating it with.
Yeah, because if I was just gonna put egg salad and avocado on a plate, there's just gonna be a bunch of like egg salad and avocado stuck to a plate.
Yeah, avocados are awesome. That's another thing. I used to hate avocados, but then once I started following a different diet, I actually love them now, and I try to eat them as much as I can.
Avocado has always been my favorite fruit.
Yeah, they're probably
Always.
my favorite now too, I would say.
Yeah, it goes good in everything. Put in smoothies, put it in a burrito, put it on salad. It goes in everything.
I've never tried it in a burrito before. I bet it's delicious though.
Yeah, I put in wraps. It's great. It's great. It's good. It's good with just salt and pepper on it. Eating it, just like crack one open, you know, have it, sprinkle some salt and pepper on top, and just like grab a spoon and dig in.
I always just do that without even putting the salt and pepper on it. Just crack it in half and then just eat it with a spoon like that.
Oh, I put salt and pepper. Gives it some nice flavor.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Salt and pepper is good.
Yes. So are you ready for the gun debate next week?
Yeah, I'm ready to talk about it from both sides of the issue, and kind of like how you were saying when we ended the last mixed mental arts chat. I think that, there probably should be some gun control, but people should still be allowed to have guns for hunting and stuff like that, but maybe they don't necessarily need like AK-47s or something like that.
Well, yeah, it's just the problem is why do people own the semi-auto rifles? It's not for hunting, not really. They do it for fun. So
Yeah, I mean,
is fun worth that much? Like, really? Is it like, yeah, you can have fun or whatever. Like, hey, I want to go target shooting with so and so weapon. Do you really have to own it? Maybe there's like a gun shop nearby that's licensed to have this for people to have fun with it. Like, I know you could do that in Vegas. You can go out in Vegas and shoot machine guns in the desert. It's it, it doesn't mean that you get to go home with one and shoot it
oh, that
whenever
sounds
you
a great
want.
idea. I didn't know that you could do that. That would be fun to do.
Yeah, in Vegas, like you can go and shoot like fully auto weapons. Um like that's what they do for a lot of bachelor parties, go to Vegas and shoot machine guns in the desert. But the person that owns them is responsible for those guns and they have to get special licenses and you know, if you're going to do something for fun, great. Does that mean that everybody should be able to handle these dangerous things for fun? It's like, you really need, this specific gun just to shoot at targets? I get it. But, is that, what's the point? You could still have fun with the weapon. Doesn't mean like you have to take it home with you or make it available for every single person without any type of scrutiny. It's like great. You
Yeah.
could still have people mess around with these things. Like I wouldn't mind if there was like a place where they'll let you shoot off bazookas. Great. Let's have a
That would be
bazooka
awesome.
shooting range where you get to own it. You get to fire a bazooka. That'd be fun as hell. Do I want people to go home and be able to have access to bazookas anytime they want? No.
Yeah.
So I think
I
there's
think,
things that can be done where we can, appease some of the people. Like I get some of the argument, like, oh, we want to, rise up against the government if they become tyrannical,
yeah,
et
there's
cetera, et
the
cetera.
Second Amendment argument, right?
Yeah, but you know what? When that happens, if the government does become tyrannical, they're not going to give you your Second Amendment.
Yeah, probably.
It's
They'll
a moot
probably come
point.
in with tanks and shit.
No, they're not going to come. They're not. If our government became tyrannical, they're going to take the Second Amendment away. So it doesn't matter if we have it now. Fine, it's not going to stop a government from becoming tyrannical. It's just there just in case. Yeah, you can own a bunch of guns and stuff, like, but it doesn't stop the government from taking the Second Amendment away. Like you think of, there's the other argument that, okay, so yeah, the government has all these bombs, guns, and airplanes and tanks and etc. But you also got to think of how long have we been in Afghanistan?
What is it,
You
since
know,
like 2001?
Yeah, exactly. And the people we're fighting, they don't have planes, they don't have tanks. Where are they getting all their guns from? The same thing would happen here. Like, if for some reason America went to civil war, right? Um, and people were afraid that their guns were going to be taken away. Wouldn't you think that some foreign power would want to supply the rebels? Like,
Probably.
yeah, exactly.
That's part of why like this is like almost everything. It's such a nuanced issue because like the other thing that I was saying at the end of the last chat or last mixed mental arts chat is that I don't necessarily fully agree with this argument, but I mean I've heard like hardcore libertarians make the same kind of argument for guns that I totally agree with in terms of drugs, which is that if you make them illegal, then people will get them on the black market anyway. But to me, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have gun laws. I think that they should they should be strictly controlled, and you should be able to know how to use them to be able to use guns. But I also I find I do it's like these like it's situationally different too, because like in some situations with mass shootings or something like that, maybe if someone or more people had a gun, then less people would die, but maybe more people would die because it would depend on the person. And I kind of understand why people say they want to have guns because they don't trust cops to get to their house before they would get shot or their family member would get shot or something like that. I understand why people say stuff like that, which is but I mean that's going to depend on different situations too. So I mean that's why this is such a complex and nuanced topic.
Yeah, and I have no problem with people owning shotguns and bolt action rifles, two weapons you can hunt with. I have no problem at all with that. It's
Yeah, I
just
was
like
saying at the end of the last
nobody
chat too
hunts with
that
a
I would love to
semi-auto
learn how.
rifle.
Yeah.
Like who hunts with a semi-auto rifle? I've never
I
seen
hunt
any
with a
hunting.
bazooka. I go into the forest with a bazooka and I just hunt deer that way. Makes it way easier. You never miss.
Yeah, but I did, to me, like I don't really care too much because really guns are a symptom if we're talking about the school shooting. That's more than just guns. There's something else there.
Yeah,
Guns
that's
is
like
just
mental
a
health,
symptom.
American gun culture, so many other like political bias, so many other different issues. And yeah,
It's too many things. Like the gun control isn't gonna solve the problem completely. It's not. Um, Even if you do ban assault rifles or what they want to call assault rifles, Columbine happened without a semi-auto rifle. They used a shotgun, a high capacity mag handgun. I think they had two sawed-off shotguns, a handgun and a hunting rifle. That's what they had. They didn't have AR-15. They had 4 guns, and I think they killed most of the people with the shotgun, with the sawed-off shotgun.
oh really?
Uh, yeah, at least more than half of the people that they killed were killed by shotgun. So that was, I think, the most lethal weapon that they used.
Oh, okay, I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
That's
Well, the
interesting.
library is where they
It's
killed the
kind
most.
of like I don't know that much about guns, but a shotgun is like more of a close range weapon than a rifle, right?
Um, well, a rifle's long range because the bullets go quick and they go far. Yeah, a shotgun is close. It's not like in video games where you're just shooting a cloud of lead. There is going to be a little bit of spread there, but you're
If
not
you
like,
get the shotgun, you'll kill Master Chief easily with a shotgun.
yeah, it depends on what type of shot you have and all that. But even with that, it's even if we get rid of the assault rifles, we still gotta we still gotta figure out why the kids want to shoot up schools. We gotta figure out a reason to give people one, not to shoot up schools. Here are the 3 big problems: school shooters, um, violent crime with guns, and suicide. So, what can we do to fix those things?
I think part of
That
it, like you were mentioning earlier, like is about how the social isolation for these people, and like there's social isolation, sometimes mental health is an issue, and it seems like there's more of like a pro-gun culture in America in general too than there is, at least here in Canada, I would say.
well, if you look at what it is, it's just really 3 elements. You have the most sensationalized is the school shootings, the mass killers, even though they're by far the minority of deaths by firearm. Um, then you have gun murder, gun homicide, which is typically through gang warfare and, you know, criminals shooting at each other for the most part. And then
Is
you
that
have,
mostly with handguns too?
yeah, it's mostly handguns. But yeah, criminals shooting at each other. Then you have people committing suicide. Those are the killers. So you got to address the problems that cause those issues. There's suicide. The thing is, the suicide and the spree killers are basically the same cause. Social isolation, depression,
Yeah.
probably.
There's so many associated problems with suicide too. Like a lot of them, I think, if I remember correctly, are connected with soldiers who have PTSD.
Yeah, that is correct. That they do have a higher suicide rate as well. So taking care of those people, figuring out the problem that we can get them their help that they need. For the criminals shooting at each other, well, what are they fighting over? They're fighting over unenforced black markets. So they have to enforce them themselves. And they do that by shooting at each other.
Yeah.
And what are
So
they shooting at
then,
each other for? Drugs mostly?
yeah. So
Market.
the drug war is also a big problem behind gang violence, obviously, right?
Yeah. So we have these big issues that have to be addressed. I know the libertarians would agree with me about the drug war. I think the drug war is what fuels most gang violence. Um,
Yeah, I pretty much have a libertarian perspective on the drug war too.
yeah, and for mental health, I would say is the exact opposite. Um, I believe we probably would need to invest more in a social safety net for people who um, who fall into these depressive issues. Like we really got to figure out what can we do as a society to help these people out. Um,
I think creating good groups is a good thing for that because, you know, like for me personally, that has helped like being part of mixed mental arts and having a sense of community has helped me with my own personal issues with depression.
mhm. Yeah, luckily I've never really had depression. Like I had it once. That's because I thought I was gonna die. But it was just me
Why
freaking
did
out
you
over
think you were
something.
gonna die?
Um, I just like went too far down the internet rabbit hole. What happened? I was getting this was all related to my gallbladder. So when I was first like getting pains in the area of my gallbladder, I kept going to the doctor, and they're like, "Oh, well, we'll take a scan of it." And they're like, "Oh, we found something in there, but it doesn't look bad. We'll keep monitoring it. We'll just do like a scan like every 6 months. You should be fine. This is normal." And then I got like it was like a couple months after a scan, and I guess what happened was like the original person that was reading the scans misread the scans, and it was actually worse than what it was originally read at. So I went to my doctor. Like, yeah, they initially misread your scans. The size of the growth is like bigger than we expected, and we need to take out your gallbladder. We don't know what the growth is. It could be fine, or it could be really bad. Um, and of course, my mind is just fixated on the very bad at that point. So I go online, do research, and like it's like, oh, it might be cancer. It's a very small percentage, but it might. I kept fixating on that. And then I fixated also on the fact that, oh, gallbladder cancer is one of the most fatal cancers in existence. So
Fuck.
if it was cancer, it was terminal basically. I think it had like a very low survival rate.
Well,
Like in a
worrying makes sense in that case then. Holy shit.
Yeah, so I was like super anxious and like kind of depressed. Like I had like a really hard time like not thinking about it. Like I remember driving home from work like every day, and like my commute was like an hour long, and like that whole hour almost every day that's all I was thinking about was like how bad it could be, like what if it's cancer, like what am I going to do? And then I just got to a point where I just like anxietied myself to like to death where I didn't care anymore. It's like I got so worried and I had so much anxiety and depression about it that I did not care. At one point, it was like, if it's cancer, I'll die, whatever. That's how I got past it. I was like, oh, whatever happens, happens. It's no point in like stressing out about it right now.
That's a good pragmatic way to get past it. Yeah.
Well, that's how I got past it eventually, but that was like the only time that I really got like anxious or depressed, I would say. But usually, other than that happening, I've never really had a problem with depression. Like,
Yeah,
not really.
I have problems with it fairly often. I kind of always have, but there are lots of different things that I do to try to help with it, and a lot of them work. Not all of them are reliable 100% of the time, but there's usually one at least out of the many different things that I do that helps fix it. So it's yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Depression sucks. It's like your mind is not your own. That's the only
Yeah,
thing I learned from that episode was like, I felt like I was thinking way too much. I couldn't control my thoughts, and I felt like if I was gonna die now, I felt like, damn it, I didn't get to do like all the stuff I wanted to do. You know, I was like feeling depressed because I seriously at that point thought I was dying. It wasn't like because of something, you know. I'm pretty sure most people that would think that they're dying would be depressed. I don't think what I was thinking was particularly abnormal, but that's just something I felt at that time that I never really felt before or since then. So at least I know kind of what it feels like, I think, for to be depressed.
yeah, it does feel like you're not yourself, like you were saying. Like it's almost like especially when it gets really bad. It's like I'm possessed or something like that. Like I just, no matter how much I try to be happy or something like that, or no matter how good my life is going, it's like I get this mindset that just spirals out of control. I see this one negative thing and it makes me assume that this thing is going to turn out negative, and then it just spirals out of control from there. Yeah.
Yeah, before and after, I really never had anxiety. Like, I always lived a pretty much live and let live type of life. If something happens, oh well. That's usually how I operate. It's just when your life hangs in the line, you're like, oh man, you know, it's different. It's not the same. Because when it's with your life, you know, you can't brush yourself off after you're dead. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
Like emotional issues that lead to it are very different, of course.
mhm. So yeah, that's the only time. Um, and that's the only way I can understand how like someone who's has a problem with depression may feel, even though my depressive episode wasn't really like how others get depressed. Because I know it's different factors from when I got obsessed. Because I just have an obsessive ish kind of attitude about certain things. Like when I get into something, I obsess over it. So
I'm that way too.
So it's just like when I heard about that diagnosis, I was obsessing over getting information about it. And then every bad piece of information that I got about it, that I was learning online or from personal accounts of things, you know, it made my mind just go to places that I really didn't want it to go and felt really fragile. And it also, I think it was less than a year before that, one of my best friend's dad died. So
Oh, that
at
sucks.
that point, like before that happened, I did not really think about too much about my own mortality. And I think that death coupled with the diagnosis really made me think about mortality more. And I think that little episode just helped me like come to grips with my own mortality. because this wasn't really something that I thought about too much, like, before that. I just lived my life how I wanted, and I really didn't think about when or where I was gonna die, or, just mortality in general.
That's
So
probably better in general. I reflect on my own death a lot, and usually it doesn't make me depressed, but occasionally it contributes if I already am in a bad mood or something like that. But I mean, there's nothing you can do about your death unless you actually had unfortunately had cancer or something like that, which gives you like a date when you know you're going to die. Unless something like that happens, most of us don't know when we're going to die, so it's probably better for the most part to just live life and try to live life in the best way that you can, and try to be happy and try to be useful and that kind of stuff.
yeah, and that's why I joined mixed middle arts, to use my skills to be useful, to lift other people up, to educate, um, just to spread the gospel, so to speak. Um, but yeah, I think
Spread the
it's
holy
just
trinity of cultural evolution.
yeah, there's just so many important ideas to help people get along with each other. That I just want people to, step back. I think this is the time too. Just the last 3 or 4 years, just how politics has just blown up in everyone's face, and everyone's just so mad at each other and is pointing fingers at each other and not really understanding each other. And that's what the big problem is that we don't understand each other.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with everything you just said. Yeah, and we should try to understand each other better and try to set a good example and be inspirational and try to help each other figure ourselves out and live better lives. That's a great thing to do, and that's one thing that I appreciate a lot about mixed mental arts too.
Well, you're lucky. You're in Canada. I think people understand each other more there.
Well, yeah, there's still assholes here,
Well,
but
there's assholes everywhere.
maybe there are less assholes in Canada than America. I think I've heard Joe Rogan say before that there are 30% less assholes in Canada than America. That might be true.
I think it is. There's a lot of assholes. And well, have you been to New York?
No, I haven't. My brother has visited there a couple times, but I don't remember what he said about what the people are like.
They're blunt. That's what they're like.
So the
Yeah.
the stereotype from films and TV is true.
Yeah, they're blunt and vulgar, but it's not. It's weird because blunt and vulgar, it means different things to different people. Some people, it's just like the way of life and fine, and some people, it's super offensive and hurtful. So it's just a different
Yeah,
thing.
totally. Like I feel like I could handle people like that because like I try to be amused by stuff like that rather than be offended by it. But that's because I try to deliberately be that way. But there are lots of people who are much more easily offended by things than I am.
Yeah, I'm not offended, but I am I've done retribution before. I have to have to tone that stuff down.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too. like uh even on the mixed mental arts Facebook group, like I was telling you earlier, a couple of times I've just gotten into like pointlessly heated arguments with people where I realized like very quickly right after that I didn't need to be so heated and they weren't saying what I thought they were saying.
well, that happens. That's mostly just miscommunications, and I think I do the same thing. Mine's just at a slightly different angle, though, because um, usually when I go in at some arguments, it's not. Sometimes I don't even support the positions that I am defending. Many times that is the case. Sometimes I do support the person that I'm arguing with, but the problem with the person I'm arguing with is that their argument isn't very good, and I'd like to have them make a better argument. So I will play the devil's advocate with them to help them shape a better argument for themselves. And that's not because it's not because I'm trying to be mean to them, but if they're going to go ahead and step out in real life and talk to a real person that might believe that devil advocate's position, what they're talking about isn't going to cut it and trying to get them to understand their position. And I've done that to multiple people. I've done it. I've probably done it to D quite a bit. For some reason, it's easier to do with like the MMA lefties than the righties. Like
Yeah,
I'll do.
that's who I've argued with more than anyone else too, because it seems like if I've said like things that are more sympathetic to the right than the left, then they're more like defensive about that, and then I get defensive even though I don't necessarily agree with whatever right-wing position I'm arguing about.
Well, the MMA lefties typically are a bit more, I'd say way more civil than like what happens with me is like there's like the usual lefties, but the righties are just like these like assassins that come in for like a day and just spout a bunch of nonsense and like really retarded stuff and leave.
That's funny.
Um,
I wonder if they're
they're
trolling with that sometimes too.
I don't know, man. Like I've seen those same talking points before. I don't really think they're trolling that much. They probably like I've been in these different groups and I observe the talking points. They're not all that different from people in the other groups. So what usually happens with the righties, usually the ones that just come in and throw up on everybody, is they quickly resort to insults. Typically, like they will quickly go to terms like snowflake, libtard, etc. Um, and then the lefties typically don't go straight to name calling. Like, yeah, I get their arguments, I get their overall arguments, but they have to phrase them in more nuanced ways. Like, it's like they think too narrowly about one subject, instead of considering other options, considering other angles. Um, a lot of times it's trying to get inside somebody's head and figure out. I'm not saying to do this. I'm saying what they do is to make inferences about what one person is thinking at a certain time. And that's basically impossible. Like you can't get into
Yeah,
somebody else's head.
yeah, definitely. Like that's why like I was just saying a few minutes ago, there have been many times when I kind of assumed that I knew what I meant by what someone was saying, but then it turns out that they actually agree with me more than I thought they were, which is why like all this idea sex on the message board and talking to each other is so important, so we can figure out what we actually mean when we're talking to each other, so we can have better idea sex and don't spill our mindgasms all over the place.
Yeah, and it's all about as well just like making sure you're informing people with the right stuff. Like I think early on and when I was on mixed mental arts, like I remember there was a lot of talk. I don't know who it was, but someone brought up like a certain incident. I think it was during like the early Brett Weinstein, like the real early Brett Weinstein era. Someone brought up, well, the students were mad because somebody had gotten murdered by the police at this certain, like a month before, unarmed black person. I went and actually did the research. And I found out that nobody was murdered by police. Someone was shot, but they were not murdered. And the person who was shot attacked a police officer with a skateboard. And the police officer was double teamed. So it was just him by himself versus two people. One of them had a skateboard. It's like, what is a cop gonna do when you're being attacked by a skateboard and another person is attacking you? What can you do? Well, luckily he didn't kill the guy, he just shot him. so
Where did he shoot him?
I don't remember, but it wasn't like a critical condition type of shot. It was just like probably like in the I don't remember. It was probably like in the shoulder or something, like nothing super major. One of the guys got shot and the other guy backed off because the other guy got shot. The guy that was attacking him with a skateboard. I couldn't imagine getting hit by a skateboard. That would hurt.
Yeah.
It would break the skull open with a skateboard. Well, anyway, my pet peeve at that time was people spreading false information. Like, you can't say, oh, Brett Weinstein deserved what he did. This is like their reasoning. Brett Weinstein deserved what happened because these students were upset about someone getting killed a month earlier. So it's like knowing the fact that nobody was killed changes the narrative like completely.
Yeah.
Someone was killed and they were justifiably shot.
Yeah.
There's a very different narrative between an unarmed black man being killed by the police rather than two men beating on a police officer, one with a skateboard, and the guy just gets shot, goes to the hospital, and recovers. That's a totally different story. And the only reason I could see them changing this story is to appeal to emotion. Like, why would you change the facts? At least use the real facts to support your argument.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I don't like police shootings more than anyone, but if you're gonna use something, use it correctly and use the correct information.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, like one of my big pet peeves is when people act like their ideology has the moral high ground. And I bet I probably seem like a conservative or a right-wing person to some people sometimes, because I tend to argue with people on the left more often about that. Because I mean, obviously people on the right act like they have the moral high ground too, but it seems like it seems to me anyway, based on my experience, that people on the left do that more often. Like they act like, no, my position has the moral high ground. And I go, well, does it though? Why do so many conservatives see this differently then? Like they say that they have the moral high ground too. Do either of you have the moral high ground?
Well, it depends on the issue. Like, who has the moral high ground? Like, I'm a moral relativist, so whatever. Like most people,
I pretty much am too.
Like, who would have the moral high ground on abortion? The woman or the baby that's getting aborted? I think they have. I don't know. I would say conservatives slightly outweigh them because a death is involved, or at least the ending of life. Like there's some liberals that think it's okay to do it up to 9 months, which I think is insane.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like it's like depending on where in the how far along the pregnancy is for the woman, sometimes abortion is murder, especially if she's like, I don't know, 6 months pregnant, and like the way that they do some of those abortions is kind of fucked up. But like then again, I still think that women should have the right to get abortions, and like even there can even sometimes be like late like complications in the pregnancy when it's very far along too. But I mean, I understand conservatives having a problem with like their like them getting worried about women getting too many abortions and stuff like that. And they are concerned about it because they think that it's like the women really are literally performing murder. So if you literally think that they are performing murder, then it makes sense from that perspective to be upset about it. But if you think that that position is just bullshit, then you're not going to agree with that if you're on the left or if you have that perspective about it.
Yeah, so it's all about pro-life and pro-choice. Like pro-choice, they are like the left is pro-choice for abortion. They are not. They are for the right is pro-life for abortion. The left is pro-life for the death penalty. The right is for per choice for the death penalty. So
Yeah.
it's not always it's weird because they don't all agree on the same things, even though a lot of them have the same issue behind it. So should someone live or die? Um, there's the pro-life for drugs. Like liberals are pro-choice for drugs, libertarians are pro-choice for drugs, and conservatives are pro-life by banning drugs. They want to ban it because they fear for the physical consequences of overdosing and things like that. So it depends on the issue, and
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think it's not about who has a moral high ground. It's what is the problem and in which way do we want to solve it. So poor people, liberals wanted to solve it through social services, and Republicans want to do it through jobs. Why not mix both of them in there? There's good ideas on both sides.
Yeah, what
Could we
an
do
idea.
for both jobs and social welfare? It's not one or the other. There's two things in there that can be taken and used to create a solution. The problem with our politics here in America, it's all right now, it's all or nothing politics. It's all or nothing. There's no compromises. It's either you support this or you don't support us at all. I don't know, it's not good right now. It's this all or nothing attitude.
Yeah, my tribe versus your tribe. You are not in my tribe, therefore you are evil.
Yeah. I think it's just we gotta detribalize. Um and I've been listening to Guns, Germs, and Steel. It was written a while ago, but there's a lot of true things in this book that definitely apply to today's society. I was listening
Yeah,
to
I
a
love that
chapter
book.
on. Oh, you read it? It's such a
Yeah,
boring book,
I think
man.
I've read it twice. Yeah.
Oh man, it's like the most boring book in the world, but it has like some great information in it. So
Yeah, yeah, good point. Yeah.
I'm listening to the chapter about how states become states, like the transition from tribe to state. There are good things about tribes. There are bad things about tribes. There's good things about states, and there's bad things about states. Great things about tribes are you have more social cohesion, but the smaller tribes, you avoid murder because everybody's related to each other. So there's always someone to step in to stop people from killing each other. So the further you go out, the harder it is to stop people from killing each other because there's no relation. Like there's no nephew, cousin, or some other link you might have to that other person that you're quarreling with. And this is where the state comes in, and the state is supposed to solve the issue of enforcing law to keep people from murdering each other. And it's a requirement, basically. Um, unless you don't have those familial ties between enemies and where you can trace your genealogy back to like a certain ancestor or a common relative, then people wig out at each other if law's not there. So a lot of the murders in the New Guinea tribes were because of people who couldn't find a common relative, and because they weren't able to find that common relative, the people that surrounded them would encourage them to go after the other person. If you have common relatives between each other, then there's going to be someone to step in and try to solve the problem for you because, oh, he's my son-in-law on this side and blah 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 on this side, and I don't want our own family relatives going at each other and killing each other. So as society expands, you need these systems in place to handle disputes, and it's just something that happens. It's something that we'll have to deal with, and it's something that history has proven that this is how humans work. This is how humans think. And it's really hard. You get more people, you get less connection, and more people want to go after each other and rip their throats out. I don't know if that's a consequence today of American politics, of how fractured our cultural society is here and how we're pointing fingers at everyone. People tribing up, it's difficult. It's going to be a difficult problem to deal with, in the long run.
Yeah, I bet it's a variety of factors, like you were just talking about, like the narrative that the social media sells and the associated problems that come along with growing populations and stuff like that. And yeah, that was a good point that you made about how there are good things and bad things about tribes, just like with everything. And obviously these are very complex, and this is very complex and nuanced, like I've said many times now, because that applies to pretty much everything.
Yep, I gotta take the good and boot the bad. That's what we gotta do. All right, man.
Totally.
We've been going on for a while.
Yeah. All right. We could stop now if you want to. Yeah, we have been we have been talking for a pretty long time. Great conversation, though. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. I really enjoyed it. We are mixed mental artists.
Yep.
And I think we just need to solve problems in a more productive way.
Totally.
It's like, yeah, he's going to go meet Kim Jong-un, but hey, at least they're talking.
Yeah, that's that's what I've been saying to people. I mean, like, if Hillary Clinton was elected as president, do you think that she would be meeting with Kim Jong-il? Or not Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un. Would you, like, maybe it'll end up being a bad thing that they talk. I don't know, but
I only hope so. I know Obama wanted to, but there was like too much backlash.
Yeah, I mean, it could end up being a really great thing for that. Trump is going to talk to Kim Jong-un. That could be amazing. We can only hope.
Yeah, I think the whole diplomatic strategy of cutting off communications is not really a good thing.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
All
Anyway,
right.
so, I'll just mention. I'll just do my own plugging here, and then you can plug yourself after too before we end this. So thanks everyone for watching this conversation. Hope to have many more like this with many more people, and I bet I'll talk to Dusty again too. And thanks everyone so much who already is my patron on Patreon, and thank you so much to anyone else who becomes my patron. I'll add the link here somewhere for my Patreon page too, and subscribe to my channel if you like this or my other videos and you want to see more stuff like this. And thanks for participating in this conversation with me, Dusty. I hope we can do it again sometime, and just plug your own stuff there if you want to.
Oh, certainly. Well, you can follow me at Twitter at Centrist. I also work with the Mixed Mental Arts crew, so You can follow at Mixed Metal Arts as well. We have a Facebook group that Andrew's also a part of, and that's slash Mixed Metal Arts at Facebook. We also have a Reddit page at our slash Mixed Metal Arts. We got Patreon as well. We go to our webpage at mixedmetalarts.online. You can shop through our Amazon link. It costs you nothing, but we benefit quite nicely from it if you're willing to support us and you don't really feel like you might be on the cheap side and you can't really put into that Patreon. Go ahead and use that affiliate link. I also have a YouTube channel where I just do, I guess, educational-ish videos. You can find me on YouTube. Just search Woke Centrist in the search bar and click on the icon that has a dude's head with a glowing eye. There's more than one woke centrist, but I am the good one. So click on me and subscribe to me. I think I'll have probably a new video up within the next month. I just need to get my teleprompter in the mail and then we're all good to go. And I think that's it with all the plugs. Back at you, Andrew.
Awesome. I still haven't gotten around to looking at your podcast yet. Honestly, I should do that too.
Well, I don't have a podcast yet. I do have some videos. I am working on a podcast, but it has nothing to do with MMA. It's an advice show. That's also a comedy show because I'm not really giving out good advice. It's probably the worst advice you've ever heard. And it probably should not be followed, but that's something I'm working on. My plan is to get 5 episodes done and then release them weekly. But yeah, I'm working on that, and I'll probably promote that more when that's done.
Okay. Yeah, I meant your YouTube channel when I said podcast. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the YouTube channel. Right now it's just videos about the book Black Rednecks White Liberal. I've gone through half the book and I've pretty much gone through each chapter pulling out the most interesting facts. I did this for people who don't want to read a book. There are people that don't like to read. So if you don't like to read, but you want to hear some interesting stuff about honor culture and black rednecks and white liberals, you can check those videos out.
All right. All right. So I'm just going to say the things that I like to say at the end of all of my videos. So, all right. Thanks everyone for watching. I love you all, and keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the world. And always remember this: the funk cures all. All right. So we'll stop here now. Thanks everyone.